lunch, mate. My ass.
I'm only 4. Bonjour, Monsieur Pussycat.
Cracking toast, Robert.
Start spreading the news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the short podcast about short films. I am your host, and we are discussing the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Today's episode is about the 80th year of the award at the 84th Academy Awards, which celebrates the films of 2011. Today's guest is appearing for the first time. Please welcome illustrator, animator, and co-owner of Jungle Red Designs, Dashiell Silva. Hello, Dashiell.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. I always just love bringing more and more of my friends onto the podcast just so we can talk about just some random short films together. It's just great fun for me.
Very kind.
But before we get going, just tell us what is your familiarity with the Oscar for Best Animated Short?
Well, okay, so like for like Dash lore, my BA was in animation. And I do some animation, but I don't work that much like in the animation industry. I like doing bits. So like I know I have a pretty good scope on like the history of the category, the history of the medium. I have a lot of ambivalence about this entire award category. And like, and this year itself also kind of serves a good case study of my ambivalence. But yeah, like I but which is to say that like it's the category that I do have scope on. I'm not as familiar with it as I am with like the acting ones, which is kind of like my bread and butter with trivia and stuff. Most of the knowledge I know from the animation um Oscar categories is from like knowing about the animation industry rather than necessarily the category itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like any
yeah.
film you know is just because you're a film fan.
Pretty much,
or
yeah,
animation fan.
yeah. And sometimes like because I do think I, maybe this is a bias, but like I feel that on the whole, the animation category throughout history, both the feature and the short, hasn't really done a very good job of kind of representing what is nice and good about this medium, in the way that as much as we can squabble about specific wins or who has a best actor Oscar or who has a best director one, when you look at the list of the people on it, it's like, yeah, this is everyone that kind of should have one. And sure, there's some people that should be here, obviously people that shouldn't, but on the whole, it feels correct. Whereas with the shorts, it's a bit like, I don't think Tom and Jerry need like 9 Oscars.
Yeah, there was a bit of narrow focus in the early
Yeah.
years. It was just the 4 studios or whatever that kept getting
Yeah.
the wins.
Yeah.
But I do like to talk about like how in the 60s through like the 80s and even beyond that is just like when the studios all went kaput and stopped
Yeah.
focusing on it. It gets really fucking weird and really fucking
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
And like
And like
that's my favorite period.
it's definitely like the most, like, when people like the Hubblies are winning awards, that's exciting. That's like people
Yes.
who have exciting voices in this medium, and that's what typically you like to see in it. And I feel that you're like you're saying early on when it was dominated by Warner Brothers, MGM, and Disney, and now contemporary where it's like more or less dominated by Disney and Pixar. It's like this isn't that exciting a competition, or it's like you have studios or filmmakers with vastly different scales of resources competing against each other, like in a competition I don't think is necessarily fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely at least true for the feature category. Like Disney does
Yeah.
dominate that, but I think people assume that happens in animated short when it really
Yes.
doesn't. Like
No, it doesn't.
I think Pixar only has like 5 wins total in this category,
Yeah.
though they do get a bunch of nominations.
There was a period I think in the noughties where they were kind of winning every year for what were, to me, often essentially glorified tech demos, like the filmmaking caliber of the films was a bit thin.
Well,
Um Yeah.
Well, they've only like if off the top of my head, I think they've only won for Tin Toy, Jerry's
Yeah.
Game, For the Birds, and then
Mhm.
there's a huge gap with which we're in the middle of right now
Yeah.
that gets broken by Piper, I think.
Mhm.
I think there's another one that I'm forgetting. Oh, Bow, that's the other one.
Yes. And I
But yeah,
think Bao is a very cute one. That's like a well-deserved one that actually has like an interesting directorial voice
yeah.
in it.
But there is also like you were saying, there is still like a resource kind of
Mhm.
discrepancy here because even the ones that like aren't Disney that do win are still ones that do have like a lot of backing behind them. Like they're
Yeah.
often made with like this really high tech CG animation or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like, but
There's also like this is kind of expanding it slightly, but like we're all used to the over the last 20 years the kind of the discourse that goes around by people that don't necessarily follow the Oscars that well, where they're like, that film won, I never heard of it, because nowadays the competition is calibrated for the competition. Whereas, 20, 30 plus years ago, it was like things like Turns of Endearment is the third highest grossing movie of 1983, and it wins every one of the major Oscars, where you have this thing where the movies that do well at the awards are the ones that people actually watch. They're phenomenons, right? And I think sometimes with those Disney shorts, Disney Pixar, whatever, as in like that specific kind of one, right? They always put them in front of their features. So there's a very like, and because those features often end up grossing like $1 billion, you can at least easily calculate this will be the most watched short film of this year. Like,
mhm.
that's not even like
It's
I
not a
think up
question.
for
Yeah, it
yeah,
just
yeah.
is.
Yeah, so for better or worse, like for a lot of people, this is what a short animated film is, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing. It can be better, but that just like as in this is what it is.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
And yeah, and there's also just like the way like in recent years, there's also just how like Netflix and other streamers have been like trying to like not just
Yeah,
this category, but all the short film categories. Like Netflix has been
yeah,
sweeping them up, and it's a little annoying to
yeah.
say the least. Like if anything happens, I love you was such a terrible win in my opinion. And then like just last year with Boy the Mole, the Fox and the Horse from Apple, it's just
Mhm.
please stop.
I feel like unfortunately with the shorts, live action and documentary and animation, I feel that this is the one that kind of like yeah, it doesn't default, but I think sentimentality really does really well here
Oh yeah.
in a way that can sometimes just be a bit uh, tiring.
Yeah, like
Um,
there are like through lines for like what's the kind of film that can win this category.
yeah.
Like if you d dive deep, there's a few that can break the mold, but most of the time it's just like they look for like the family friendly stories about
Mhm.
that'll tug at your heartstrings and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and speaking of which, let's move on. Actually, but before we even get to the shorts ahead, even though this podcast is very short film centric, I do like
Mhm.
to just give a little shout out to the best animated feature category, just since we're here.
Yeah.
And so, Dashiell, I'm going to just list off the names of the five nominees for best animated feature, and I want you to tell me just in one word what you thought of them, or simply say you haven't seen it. You
Okay,
ready?
cool. Yeah.
All right. So this is a fun year because first we have the winner, which is Rango.
Hmm.
Oh, what'd you think?
I haven't seen that one,
All right.
but I know it does have a good reputation. I think at the time I was the Johnny Deppness of it, and to this day, obviously that still is the case,
Mhm.
but I was a bit reticent to engage with it. But I've heard it's good.
Number two, we have A Cat in Paris.
Uh, oh, that one looks really cool. I haven't seen that one either. I actually
The
haven't seen. I don't think I've seen that many of the features in this year.
It's okay. We'll just go
Okay.
through the list. Number
Okay.
three, we have Chico and Rita.
Oh, that was gorgeous.
You
Yeah,
saw
that
it?
was yeah, no, I remember when I remember seeing that was one I was most excited about. Like I haven't seen, unfortunately. Ugh, I feel really bad.
Uh,
Um yeah, but like
no,
that one okay, here's what I'll say. Actually I just want to check something. Is my microphone okay?
yeah, I can hear you. All right.
Okay, sorry. I'll just take a second. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so Chico and Rita, what I really liked about was my perennial bugbear with like animated films. feature, short, everything, is that they rarely like push what the medium is, either visually, but specifically in terms of content. It's this isn't a unique insight for me, but like, the feeling that animation people complain that they won't be taken seriously as a medium, yet at the same time, it's like, well, you have to stop making movies about talking animals then. Like it's like it's one thing to voice the criticism, but if you don't see that industry making meaningful um movements in that direction. And I think that's what's cool about Chico and Rita. Like it's actually trying to do that, right? And
Mhm.
it's one of those moments too where it's like the content suits the visual language and the visual style really well. Like it isn't, because sometimes it's a bit like, why was this animated? Like this could have been live action, or like it's tricky finding the exact reason why this works. This should be animated or shouldn't be animated,
Mhm.
which I like a lot in this case.
All right. And then our number four, we have Kung Fu Panda 2.
I have actually seen this one.
What
Yeah,
did
no,
you
I
think
don't.
in one word?
Stylish,
All
very
right.
stylish. Sorry, I know. I realize I'm just kind of rambling.
It's fine. It happens a lot. People just get too caught up in the films. Number five is Puss in Boots.
Oh, mm, I'd say by this point, because I think I hadn't seen this one, but I was very burnt out on Trek, so I'm gonna say tired.
Perfect.
As it, I mean, that's cold, but like the Trek movies have their defenders. I am not one of them. I don't get it. I find them a bit ugly looking. But so by the time this came along, it was a bit like, cool. What is it the fourth Trek? Is it the fourth Trek movie or is it the fifth Trek movie?
So I think in terms of like release order,
Yeah.
I think this came out after Forever After. But yeah,
Okay.
but it's not a Shrek movie. It's a Puss in Boots movie.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
spin-off.
Sure, sure. But you understand what I'm saying. It's like the
Yeah.
creative decisions and tone and voice from those Trek movies kind of continuing on to this. And like I just didn't quite like the I don't know, just it wasn't quite for me.
That's understandable. Yeah, I remember it having a bit of a mixed reception when it came out, if I
Yeah,
remember
because
correctly.
I think it's like, well, the moment was very past, right? And like, and Antonio Banderas as Puss was a lot of fun, genuinely, but it's just, yeah, it was kind of like, who is this for? I mean, it's for kids. It's for kids. It's fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like us as adults saying it's like, oh, what's the intent here? But like, it's harder for us to like find a bit of a reason to be excited for it, you know?
Yeah. But anyway, we've gone through that. Let's
Yeah.
move on to the shorts at hand.
Mhm.
Uh, so our first nominee and the year's winner is The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore, directed by William Joyce and Brandon Oldenburg. This is the first and only nomination and win for Joyce and Oldenburg. And let's start with William Joyce. He is
Mhm.
a prolific children's book author, writing the original stories behind the films of like Meet the Robinsons, Rise of the Guardians, and Epic. He got his start as an illustrator in the mid 80s and just grew his empire from there. He
Mhm.
started writing his own stories, and in the mid 90s, started he started working on films, doing concept art for Toy Story and Bug's Life, and by the end of the decade, he'd found perhaps his greatest success as a creative, show running the children's TV series Roly Poly Oly, winning 3 Emmys for the series, which ran for 6 years and 75 episodes. It was around the start of Roly Poly Oly that Joyce had become acquainted with the other man of the hour, Brandon Oldenburg. So let's rewind a bit and tell his side of the story. Oldenburg first started making a name for himself at Real FX, an animation and effects studio, which he joined in 1995. The company would go on to produce a few animated features, including Freebirds and The Book of Life, but at this point it was just trying to make a name for itself in the ever-growing computer animation field. Its first major jobs were doing effects for Barney the Dinosaur specials, as well as work on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and its spin-off Angel, and even What Dreams May Come, which won an Oscar for its visual effects. Oldenburg was a senior creative at the company, and his relationship with William Joyce began in 1998 when they made a test film based on one of Joyce's stories, The Man in the Moon. Thus began William Joyce's partnership with Real FX and Brandon Oldenburg. There were multiple attempts to make films together, first when they formed the company Ainsworth Amusements in order to make three feature films based on William Joyce's stories. One of the films was picked up by DreamWorks Animation, which eventually became Rise of the Guardians. Joyce was originally supposed to direct the film, but left due to multiple urgent family matters. However, before Rise of the Guardians came out, there was the fantastic flying books of Mr. Morris Lessmore, the film we're supposed to be talking about. This was made by a second company formed by Joyce and Oldenburg called Moonbot Studios and was formed mainly to make this film, but the film's success led to the company to make more films, including an upcoming animated feature based on The Great Gatsby, or at least they announced one in 2021. Who knows if it'll actually come out? But back to Morris Lessmore. The film has a few key inspirations. First, Joyce was inspired to write the story by book publisher William Morris, with the story being about a man who puts life into books, much like a publisher does. And that's where the name Morris comes from, of course. From there, the film itself found some inspiration from classic films, specifically the films of Buster Keaton and The Wizard of Oz. Buster Keaton inspired the look of the main character as well as the comedic timing and set pieces, while The Wizard of Oz provided more of an aesthetic inspiration with a deliberate usage of color, and both sources have massive storm scenes between the storm in Steamboat Bill Jr. and the tornado in The Wizard of Oz. As for the filmmaking techniques, the film uses a mix of live action sets with CG animated characters to create a really stunning film to behold. But what is the story? The fantastic flying books of Mr. Morris Lessmore starts with a man reading on a balcony when suddenly a storm destroys his entire town. His world literally turned upside down, and his book, also without words, he's become lost. However, he sees a woman flying through the sky with a flock of books. Wanting to be like her, she sends him a flying book that guides him to a whole library, which he proceeds to take care of, mending old books and lending them out to the community, giving his life to the joys of reading. I want to point out that this year is the same year that The Artist and Hugo were both big Oscar winners. So it's a big year for silent film appreciation. Dashiell, what did you think of the fantastic flying books of Mr. Morris Lessmore?
I'm really sorry I didn't like it.
It's okay.
No, okay, so like I don't know how your description of it was actually really good, and it made me like it a little bit more. But when I was watching it, I kind of felt it felt quite muddled to me. Um, in that like, well, I feel like stories about storytelling are like this real sort of like holy grail type thing that a lot of writers, creatives like to do. And I think they seem appealing, but I don't know if it's me, but like I don't respond to my partner, he really loves them, but like I tend to be a bit cold on them. So in this case, I was just a bit like when I was watching it, I kind of felt this is about I, I'm interpreting this like as a story about the wonders of books and reading
Yeah.
and literature and that. Then why is it silent? You know, like I'm just like, why is there no spoken? Why is there no language really? I know there's some writing on screen briefly, but like, it feels to me that like a whole section of what this story should be about is kind of like missing. Um, whether or not like it would be this is going to be really highbrow and literary and like we're going to dive into Don Quixote and stuff. Maybe that's probably a stupid idea, but I just mean that like the page master kind of does this, and I feel a little bit more successfully.
Hmm.
This idea of like books, gateways to another world, literature, fun. I know that the film's actually maybe doing some other stuff, but that was the part I kept trying to like cling on to a bit, and I was sort of like I kind of want this to come to something, and it never really did for me, unfortunately. It kind of felt a bit disjointed. Um, but like because this is the point I wanted to make, okay? When I was in college doing animation, it's pretty common to, and I've been to tons of film festivals, seen tons of short films in programs everywhere. And I think there's this kind of short film that a lot of students make, which is, a character in an environment interacting with things, and there's no dialogue, and it's just them, like it's all faces and stuff. And it's such a simplistic kind of filmmaking to me. I think that you have the option of having words to expedite your storytelling. Why not take advantage of that? And so I guess what I'm saying is that like this is an issue that annoys me about like a lot of short films as a whole. Um, uh, uh, that it's just like you could make this go faster. That's why I guess why I'm harping on the whole like why is there no like language in this story? Because it feels like one of those films that is like made in France or something and plays at Annecy and like does really well internationally because the lack of language makes it accessible to people. But I
Mhm.
think I'm at a place where I want specificity.
Yeah.
If yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's like I thought your point about like how this is a film about like the joys of reading, but it doesn't
Mm,
ever really go into like what makes books like enjoyable. Like it doesn't have
exactly.
any like written language. Because I wasn't thinking about that at all. It was just like I
If it felt a bit like a book talky kind of thing where it's like this is like a cute girl reading books kind of like it felt too vibey in a way that like in times like this, especially when I get very bitter, I always think of Holly Hunter at the start of broadcast news when she's showing like some footage that's showing the bad save news and everyone's applauding, but it's like Domino's and she's like, I'm a fun person. I like fun. So I want to stress that like I am a fun person. I can enjoy things.
Mhm.
But yeah,
And we'll
like
get to the stuff you do enjoy.
yeah, you know, there's stuff here, there's stuff in this lineup I do absolutely adore. I want to make that clear. But like, yeah, just with this film, I was like, this is so not working for me, and I feel really bad because it is genuinely trying to be like quite sweet and stuff, but it's just not landing.
Yeah,
And
like
like,
I so I'll say that I was charmed by this movie. I do like
mm,
this, but at the same time, like so I used to think this is one of the best films to ever win the Oscar in this category. But
mm,
on this rewatch, it's like the faults of the film do kind of show up. Like this is less of like artistic storytelling and more just a film that you would watch in a library just to like
yeah,
accentuate books are cool. Don't
yeah,
don't you like books, kids? But it's just like but I was charmed by it. Like I do love like I love how like the first half of it where it kind of goes into a bit of like the Buster Keaton kind of
mhm,
slapstick. Like also I just think the main character is cute. I enjoy Buster Keaton. I like the way he looks. Um but yeah, I enjoy like the comedy that there was in the first half.
mhm,
But then it's like as it goes on, it becomes a lot more sentimental. It becomes a bit much at times, where it's
yeah,
just like especially like the ending where it's just like, oh, he's old now, and it's like he's fulfilled his purpose. He's written his fucking book, and then it's like the books fly around him and de-age him, and
yeah,
he flies off like the lady at the beginning, and
as a
then
metaphor for death or something. And he's
exactly.
yeah, I suppose this is my thing. It's like I found it just if it just felt very vague in places. So like we're given these images, and like going, cool, I'm inferring what this means. I don't know what it means, and I think the movie wants us to take this as heartwarming. I'm finding this frankly horrific that there's this like horrifying library that just devours people for their whole lives of
Yes.
service. As in like, okay, I'm being joyless there, but like the point is that you can take that reading of it, but because I feel there's a lack of like clarity in the intent as to what we should be feeling about situations in this, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so when the little girl turns up at the end, I'm like, oh God, it's ensnared another victim, you know?
That's exactly what I thought when the girl was walking out. It's like even though I was like on the film side, it was just like, oh God, it's taking another victim. It's an
Yeah.
endless cycle of death.
Yeah, and it's like I know that I know it's supposed to be the continuity of storytelling, isn't it beautiful? But again, it's not clear enough with what that is. These images are evocative, but they're not specific. And I just need a slightly stronger like authorial voice in this to make it
Mhm.
like clear as to what I should be feeling. Because yeah, I'm just and this is why I guess I'm saying that like this is why tools like dialogue, like characters speaking can help to really solidify what the intent is. Especially if like, you are trying to convey something quite specific like this story seems to be.
Mhm. Yeah,
Like, yeah.
and yeah, I'm just still hung up on the ending. It's just like they really make it seem like she has no choice in the matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Like they just choose her as the next one, and she has to just go along with it. But yeah, it's like it. I and also like when I was watching it, I also felt like it could have been longer, or like
Yes.
it's like it. I guess that's part of like what you're saying, how it's like there is a bit of like unclearness, and there's like some weird jumps around, like in
Yeah.
just like a, makes it a leap in the story that's like you don't see the connection there, but it's like I
Yeah.
definitely could feel like there could have been more meat on this. It could have been. I feel like they
Yeah.
probably could have even extended it to a feature film, maybe, had they had the
It fe-
resources and writing
really
team.
it really feels like it's something like that. And like, look, we've both seen like a lot of animated shorts, and we both know the specific horror of like an animated short that is far too long and under edited.
Yes.
So like, so like I will say like, look, I'm not especially enjoying watching this, but I'm glad that it isn't longer. But it's just such a bizarre feeling that like I'm feeling watching it going, it really feels like this needs to be longer, but I'm not really having a good time watching it. So it's sort of like, okay. But yeah, but if I say when we say longer, I guess what we mean is like expanded, right? It's like
Yeah.
if there was like a fun sidekick character, if there's or something, just any, because I think that's the issue. It's like
Well, there is the fun psychic character. There's the Humpty Dumpty book,
oh, sure, sure.
which I did think was really, I did really like the book, and I like
That
the
was
way
I
it
yes, that was
animated itself with the pages.
yeah, that actually was a really nice touch. I think that was really nice. I did like that. I actually okay, so like I know you like Buster Keaton, I do too, but I actually think that the Buster Keaton association was also kind of a bit confusing, and maybe I don't know why it served other than the guys that made it really like Buster Keaton, which can sometimes be enough, totally fine. But I'm just not sure. Again, the vagueness, like I'm not sure. Are we supposed to really think this? Are we supposed to like really make a connection here
Yeah,
or
I
something?
don't think there was a thematic thing. I think they just wanted
No.
to, they were
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
inspired by Buster Keaton a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess it's adding more fuel to my whole like written language, the word kind of stuff, where it's like
Yeah.
Buster Keaton famously silent, and it's like, look, you can read books and be silent, but it's a case of language, So like, there's no, there is like language in a Buster Keaton movie, but you know what I mean? It's like not really like a wordy type of film, aside from
Yeah.
being silent. It's not like he has tons of intertitles and
Yeah,
text cues and stuff.
he's more physical, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, which
But
obviously, yeah, like yeah, it has like such a backbone in like classical animation and stuff. So like I see that connection, obviously.
but yeah, so I think we're on the same page with like what we think of
Mhm.
this movie. It's just I enjoy what the film is doing more than you do. But it's
Yeah,
just like we're both in agreement that the film is it's fairly surface level.
yeah,
It just wants you to it just wants to be like, oh, aren't books cool? And
yeah,
just like it has all these little details to try and just like keep the movie going. Like it has like the Buster Keaton set pieces and whatever, just to like give it something more
yeah.
than just like books are cool. But it's like that's at the end of the day, that's just what it's trying to say. It's
Mhm.
and like any it feels almost like more thought into it is wasted because it's just like they didn't really care about you doing that.
Yeah, and I also think I had briefly looked up Joyce's work, but like I hadn't actually considered when you said that he was a children's author, that makes it all make sense because I'm realizing now it's like who is the target audience for this? And like it is for children, right? Like as
Yeah.
in, there's the rule of thumb that almost all animation tends to be for children, but like this feels like especially for a child audience. That's why me as an adult, like I'm like, oh, can we get some like fun Evelyn Wall references in here? Like, I'll be looking for like really specific, just anything to give it a bit of color and specific charm. But like, a kid's not gonna care or know that's far too over their heads. So like I understand then why it's a bit vague and never really goes beyond Humpty Dumpty in terms of like the canon. Um, but like it's like so I guess in some ways that criticism from me is a little unfair, but this is the film that won, so I feel that like it's okay to be a bit harsher on it.
Yeah. Now
Especially
I'm
because I
just
do think there's two others that are stronger in this lineup.
yeah. Now I'm just imagining a version of this story where instead of like the Humpty Dumpty book, it's like a little life or something that's like guiding him around the library.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Like like you couldn't do this, but like there would be something fun and satirical if it was like a Yummy Mummy and this is like a a book club selection of books, so it's like just the worst like Bridges of Madison County, like just flowery nonsense. That these books obviously sell millions and millions of copies, they're hugely popular, but so it also means lots of people are kind of familiar with them, but we they're popular, but we also kind of make fun of them. It's like that's like a a highbrow comedy sketch type thing, as in like really, really specific. But that could be, I would actually really like that.
Hmm. Like there'd be more like a deeper intent with that.
Like, like a suburban mom who like, like feels that she like loves literature, but like all she reads is kind of like mostly mediocre kind of like, book clubby mass appeal type stuff. So it's sort of like feeling like this like um slight like superiority but like fulfillment, but it's like but the stuff you're reading is just crap.
Hmm.
And like but again as like at a level of you could do something funny with that, I think.
Yeah,
But that's a different film. I don't know
it's not
why
the
I'm
film we
pitching.
have here.
No, it's absolutely not a film. Like this is like a really like fucking French and Saunders type sketch or something. I don't know what this is, but it's a different thing.
So as we kind of wrap the discussion of the
Yeah,
short, I just want to point out that like they made a mobile app for this movie,
yeah.
and I'm just like, and it's like as I look through like uh, Joyce and Oldberg's other movies, it's like they do that with their other movies too. Like they did that with like they have another shortlisted film called The Numberlies or whatever that has an
Mhm,
app. And something else I found in my research was that in 2013, like it was directed by Brandon Oldenburg, I think,
mhm.
and he made this short film for Chipotle,
I've seen this.
that features a
Sorry.
Fiona Apple cover of Pure Imagination, and that's about a scarecrow who works in this dystopian meat factory. And it's just like this is just an ad for a fucking mobile game,
I
and it's just
remember
like
this.
it's such a bizarre string of words to have exist.
I
But
so the reason I know and like sorry because
go
I
ahead.
knew it was in the back of my head. So like because like when I looked up like the when I was looking up just some details on this movie, um it was like, oh, made in Shreveport, and I knew because when that Chipotle thing, they've got like a lot of coverage on like blogs and stuff when it was released because it was really cool and all that, and it was like in and it said based by it was Moon, what was the name of the studio again?
Moonbot.
Moonbug.
Moonbot.
Moonbot. Moonbot Studios in Shreveport, and like American names just like sound very evocative to me. So like, oh, Shreveport, I love that. So like it always just stuck in my mind. And it's like how many animation studios can there be in Shreveport, Louisiana anyway? But like, yeah, like it just sorry that just got me very excited.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is just a very I don't understand why they feel the need to make a mobile app. And there's
Yeah,
another nominee later where it's just like a morning stroll features an app in its story, and it's just like people were like when they asked the filmmaker like, "Hey, when's the app going to release? When's Zombie Breakdown's going to release?" But it's like, no, that film doesn't have the app. The app,
yeah,
this other one is the one with the app.
yeah.
But yeah.
Like it must make sense somehow, like, because I mean, I know that was very much the time, like, I have an app for that was like the lazy joke you stuck in whenever you didn't have a joke and you just make some things seem like a joke.
Hmm.
Um, so, but yeah, like, I don't know why they specifically have a thing for it.
I think they
Like,
just wanted to make games. Like I think they just wanted to make apps. It just seems like
yeah,
something they enjoy doing.
yeah, it, I think there's a lot of overlap between like independent animators and video game designers, like, as
Yeah.
in, a lot of people try doing both or want to do both, or maybe try to think they want to do one and want to do the other, right? Because like literally, oh, well, the guy directed Sunday because he's a video game
Yeah.
developer as well, isn't
I
he? Yeah.
do mention that later. It's like
Yes.
he made a video game like and I played it. It's like it's
Mm.
just a little thing, but
Yeah.
he did make a game.
So I think there's just it's it's something about there's just that same kind of like impulse, like oh, I'm trying to think of some equivalent. Okay, haven't got one, sorry.
It's okay.
like the all actors want to be directors or something. I don't know, but like even though they don't, but like that's haven't got one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anything else you'd like to say about the fantastic flying books of Mr. Morris Lessmore?
Um, it doesn't seem cynical. Like I'll
Mm,
give that. I think it does have heart. I just think that it needed a tighter um point of view.
yeah. Need to be more specific.
Yeah, I do think it is the least deserving of the winners in this lineup as well. Like as in I would have put it fifth because
Oh, well, careful. We're gonna do a rank at the end. Don't want to spoil
okay.
it.
But I just I when I watched all of them, I was like, yeah, no, I'd be ha I could have given it to any of the others. That's all. Okay.
All right. So let's just move on to our second nominee, which is La Luna, directed by Enrico Casarosa. This is Casarosa's first and only nomination in this category, but the 11th for Pixar, and it has been 10 years and 8 nominations since they last won the category. They still got 5 more years until they win again, even. But anyway, Casarosa was born and raised in Italy, only moving to the United States to study animation. He ended up specializing in storyboards and story writing in his career, doing storyboards on shows like Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders, 101 Dalmatians, the show, and PB&J Otter, and films like Ice Age and Robots before ending up at Pixar. And still as a story artist, Casarosa worked on films like Ratatouille, Up, and Cars 2, doing his time at Pixar until being given the chance to direct a short. At Pixar, at least at this time period, the way the short film process works is that people will ask around if anybody, literally anybody, has an idea that they'd like to make for a short film. Those who do will pitch it to the board at Pixar Creatives, who have been designated to hear the pitches. They will then filter out the best ones and then let those ideas float their way up to John Lasseter, who makes the final call as to what gets greenlit. And at this point, it's Casarosa who's gotten in Lasseter's favor to get his short film made. And after making La Luna, Casarosa ended up as part of the Pixar Senior Creative Team, which I'm not really sure what that is. It might be the board I was talking about before. It might be something completely different. Corporate structuring makes no sense to me.
I think it's a different thing.
Okay.
I think it's a purely creative body.
Again, I couldn't really find anything that really explained
Yeah.
what it meant, but regardless, that's where Casa Rosa is, and that is pretty much the extent of the story, outside of the fact that Casa Rosa ends up making a feature film for Pixar, Luca, which is one of Pixar's best films in my opinion,
Mhm.
and it earned Casa Rosa an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature. But besides that, that's it. But what about La Luna? The film's origin, as Casarosa tells it, comes from two prongs. First, Casarosa wanted something personal, something emotional to him to ground him. He goes back to his childhood in Italy and remembering his father and his grandfather and the dynamic the three of them had together, and brings those characters into the story. And what's the story? That's the second prong. He brings in what he loves in movies, what he loves in stories. He mentions Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and Italo Calvino and their works The Little Prince and The Distance of the Moon being inspirations for the film. Casarosa admires Covino for his blend of the mundane and the surreal, and thus Casarosa does that with La Luna, blending his own mundane, which is his family, and the surreal, which ends up being his personal fascination with the moon. So he made his pitch, and everyone on every level seems to love this film to the point where during production there was almost no changes made from his original vision. The beauty of the film was in its simplicity, not just story-wise, but tech-wise. When I read about the making of Day and Night last episode, there was a comparison made by Teddy Newton, that film's director, about how easy and simple Luna was compared to his. There was only 2 environments and 3 characters needed to render, all of which were very simple tasks, while Day and Night had multiple animation styles and dozens of environments. And Day and Night was a film about technological innovation. La Luna is about the beauty of its world and its story. The film is about 3 generations of men on a boat, with the youngest being out on the job for the first time. The father and grandfather give him a hat but disagree about how he should wear it. Suddenly, the big and beautiful moon comes into view, and the 3 anchor onto it and climb upon it, sweeping up all the stars that have landed on its face. The father thinks the broom is best, but the grandfather prefers a mop. But the young boy is more interested in the shooting stars. Eventually, the boy finds his own style of hat, uses a rake to clean up the stars, and the 3 men give the moon a crescent shape. So I'm going to start off by saying that this is one of probably one of the more iconic Pixar shorts, I think,
Yeah.
because it's like I feel like not only do they just use it in a lot of marketing, but just the visuals that this
Mhm.
film brings are just so like the shot when the moon finally comes into view is
Yeah.
just so awe-inspiring. Like it's just a perfect visual. And then just like as they're on the moon, the not just the visual, but the sound design of when they're like cleaning up the stars and everything. There's
Oh,
just
the little tinkle sounds.
exactly. It's just there's a lot of just all these little details that really
Yeah.
make this film stand out. And it's like, but also the story is just very, very simple, which can work to Pixar's short success. It kind of works here, but also I just kind of wish there was a little more for me. Like it kind of it's kind of repetitive, I guess is my
Yeah.
main problem, is because it just kind of reiterates like, oh, the two old men really disagree about what they want the son to do, and then eventually it's like he does his own thing, and it's just like
Mhm.
it kind of harps on the same points again and again. It
Yeah.
doesn't look like it's. I wish it just maybe emphasized the world a bit more, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right.
yeah, but in the end, it's still just like it's still a good Pixar short. It's still iconic. It's still a joy. It's still enjoyable to watch. It's just a
Mhm.
good movie. Good.
Mhm.
What about you?
Yeah, like I agree with a lot of what you said. Like I think remember what I said before about like the tech demos. I think this manages to avoid a lot of it. Like I don't care for day and night at all. Like I think that it's just too the technique outstrips the story, and the story is actually quite thin. I think it's kind of like A, B, interacting, doesn't really have a lot of substance, which is fine. It's just I had grown tired by that whenever like I saw that movie. But with the Luna, first of all, I'm always excited whenever the three characters in the scene. Like it's harder to write, it's better to write. A triad is dramatically more interesting than a duologue, I think.
Mhm.
So I like that. You make a very good point though about the repeating, and I think that like this is one of those times like had there been actual dialogue with these characters, I think it would have really just pushed over the edge a little bit, given
Mhm.
them specific names that they call each other, talk about specific things, like because it's like because when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's just like the Distance of the Moon, the Calvino story. Like I had heard I think Liev Schreiber did a reading of it for like a This American Life episode years
Oh.
ago. Yeah, it's pretty good. And like that story is really it's like it's almost identical to this. Like it's a little bit different. It ends in a slightly more melancholy way. In a way, it's quite nice because in the story, the idea is that it's like I'm going to tell you long ago when the moon used to be closer to the Earth, but it started moving further and further away. So there's a little bit more of a wistfulness to it that I think again, if you could maybe have found a way of working into this story. Um, but one thing there's like an interesting choice as well, like in the Calvino story. I have not read it, but based on how Schreiber performs it, I think the characters all have like wacky ass names, like what's that road in California that's like
Oh,
ZZXYZ?
Zizek's Road.
Yeah, yeah. It's like they all have names like that, like unpronounceable names, which given that Calvino's writing is like so Italian, like it's this, like it's very, it's just it has a very specific style that just like kind of gives it this nice little alienish quality that I think it probably wouldn't work in this Cazzarosa movie, but it's just little bits to snag out because the core story is really nice. And maybe just in places it just needs just a little bit of something.
Y-
Um, yeah,
So I wasn't really familiar with the story. It's like
okay.
I of course like I knew that it was like inspired by it from like reading it about it, but I didn't end up reading the story. But
Yeah.
you
It's
saying that
really it's really similar. Like it's all about like laborers harvesting stuff from the moon. I think they're harvesting cheese or something. Or no. It's that the moon is covered with this stuff that's like basically like chalk, and they harvest it for like businessy industrial like boring stuff. But the point is it's a
Mhm.
resource. They're farmers. That's the farmer fisherman type guys.
Right.
So that's like kind of what it's evoking. They make it a bit more visually interesting in this movie. But that's kind of why it's all about in the story.
Yeah. And it's like you talking about how like the ending of it is like where the moon is drifting farther and farther away. That that makes me think of like an interesting like something that would make this film more interesting. It's like if they include that where the moon's getting farther away and use it to parallel how like maybe like the sun is like drifting further or the father and
Yeah,
grandfather are drifting further away. Like the grandfather dies and
yeah,
the father gets older. He has to do a job by himself, or maybe he has his own son. And it's just like I think that could make a really interesting metaphor or whatever,
yeah.
allegory, whatever. But
There's a thing that happens with, I think, a lot of, especially American animation, feature films and shorts, mostly feature films, but it applies to Pixar as a whole, I think. Which is stuff often gets overdeveloped, which is that, like, it's how we end up endlessly with the, sexy female penguin with like the hourglass figure and eyelashes. That's how you know she's a female. You know what I mean? Like that kind of design. And the guys always have like goofy eyes close to each other in the middle. Like that's how you tell gender, right?
mhm.
Um, and it's like it also, I think, ends up meaning that sometimes they end up sort of boiling away story bits that can seem extraneous, but often it's those extraneous bits that give it just a little bit of extra color, right? It's not that
Mhm.
there's like this alchemically pure story that you can just, carve and carve and carve away to, and that's it. It's like, yeah, you want that to some extent, but you also just want some little bits. And that's again one of those moments where I think that just any spoken dialogue could like help with that. Like, talk about grandma making something back at home whenever they get back, just things like that, implying it's a bigger world or something.
And it's like you talk about like how a lot of these could use more dialogue, but that can
Yeah.
also be like a disservice. Like,
Yes,
when
yes,
the
that's
dialogue sucks, or
yes,
even just like it like film is like of course film is about showing and not telling, but it's
yes,
like using the visual medium to tell your story. But there's there's two sides of the coin. It's like about how well you use that visual medium, and it's
yes.
like versus like when your story isn't totally working, you can just throw in a line of dialogue there
Yeah.
to like really push things along. It's
I
about
guess what I mean by that, sorry, 'cause I realize I didn't explain that too much, and it seems like I'm just making the same point. I always remember when I was in college, I read the Film Sense, the Eisenstein book, and he was writing at the time when only silent movie existed. And he had like this chart about like this is what like a montage is. So it's like shot A, shot B, shot C, shot B should relate to shot A, and it's explain the idea of what a montage is. But he kind of speculates about the idea of a future sound film. And what he does is he has basically the two things running side by side. So as well as them each shot interacting with the one that came before and after it, he's also like the sound should be interacting. I guess that's what I mean to say that like it's these extra threads. It's not that they need to speak. It's just more that like uh you have this option of like using this tool, and on the whole, with I think too many animated shorts, by default they don't use any sort of spoken word or dialogue in them, and so it's kind of like my evergreen criticism. It's like, hey, why don't you find a way to add that? If that makes sense.
yeah, it's just all about like finding what's right for your story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with what you say. Like, to be fair, I think maybe in this movie it doesn't need it. I think it's actually totally fine in that respect. The previous one I think could have the Fantastic Flying Books could have used it a lot more. I think this one is quite it there's enough going on there. The fact that we have a triad of characters, frankly, is enough dialogue in itself. These characters, just by their relationships, are in dialogue, and that's good enough for me,
Yeah,
right?
and because they're telling, they use enough body language to really like
Yeah.
get across like what they're feeling and everything.
Exactly. And like that's it. I guess, yeah, well, because I feel that like often with I'm hard because I love them. No, but with a lot of animated shorts, and it applies to live action shorts, it's like because obviously this is usually people fairly early in their careers finding their feet. It can sometimes the filmmaking can be a bit uh, 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 beginner level sometimes not
Mhm.
in Casarosa's case because he's an experienced storyboard artist by this point. I just mean that like three characters in a scene is harder to direct, but it gives you more, and I think that that's what I think people should be pushing for. I think that's why Casarosa does it in this movie because he knows what he's doing. He knows that cool. I've done two talking head scenes with characters for years. I don't need to do that anymore. I want to push myself just a little bit.
Mhm. And yeah, and he does a good job. I
Yeah, he
do
does.
really
He
enjoy
does.
this one.
Yeah. Now, this one has a lot of charm. And I think, by the end when you have that shot with like the moon is like, a crescent shape because they've kind of done harvesting all the shooting stars. Like, oh, this is coming together really nicely. It's not just twee imagery of like stars and stuff. It's like, oh, cool, you've managed to take some nice bits of this and take it somewhere, which is nice.
Hmm. And the whole like reveal of what they're doing and everything, making the moon a
Yeah.
crescent. It's like it's nice. It's cute.
Yeah, yeah. Like it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's like it's just it works really well for what it
Yeah.
because actually I realized I didn't say this. So like because by the time this had come out, I had known of Casarosa's work for ages, but not because of his animation work, but because of his comics work.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. So like alongside his storyboarding work, he'd been I don't know when his last one was, but like I own at least 3 or 4 books that he's like done comics for, and he has a really his illustration style is really nice. It's actually very at odds with what the Pixar look is in that it's very Ghibli derived, but
Hmm.
specifically like My Neighbors the Yamadas, like that Ghibli style, not the
Yeah. Not the Miyazaki stuff.
yeah, not the not the Miyazaki one. So he kind of like and he does a lot of like biographical comics and stuff. So he's like this little like troll man or little hobbit man, which is quite cute, even though I think he's quite tall in life. But and it's all like scratchy pencil stuff with like a nice watercolor thing, which again is very at odds with what the Pixar style is generally, but also especially at that time, where they're kind of ever trying to look for more realistic things. His is just so watercolory. Uh, yes, like I'd always been a big fan of his work for that reason.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd really love to check them out sometime.
Yeah, he has a really nice book called I think the Venice Chronicles, which is just like a little travelogue thing, I think, of him like in Venice on a holiday, and it's like nice and vibey, because Venice is inherently gorgeous and cinematic, but it's just done really, really nicely. And like obviously watercolors are very good at depicting water. Like it just looks beautiful.
Oh yeah, and that was his last book, it seems like it.
Uh,
Like, yeah.
I think he had a kid around then,
That
and
would also explain it.
yeah, I feel like his priorities definitely change because that's also I feel like whenever his Pixar career really starts to ramp up. Um, at least as far as I mean, I don't have enough to actually say that I'm speculating wildly, but I think that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I remember reading that one of these filmmakers had a child like 2 years before they made their movie, and trying to remember if it was Casa Rosa or not.
I
I
think it's him.
it might be, but oh, I'm not sure. Actually, I think it might have been Patrick Doyon.
Oh, I think because he's a dad too.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
he's the one who mentioned it, but
I
who
know
knows?
that Casper. I know
That
Casarosa
doesn't
had a
mean
kid around
Casa
this
Rosa
time,
can't have a
definitely.
kid.
I just remember an image of him with like one of those I don't know what they're called, but like it's when you have like a pashmina tied around you, and your baby's like sitting inside it. So like he
Oh yeah.
had that while he was painting some watercolors, and that's from I think I just moved to the UK, so that's like around 2011. So it's like it's contemporary with this time. I know there's a baby on the scene sometime around here.
Hmm. All right, but yeah. Any final thoughts on the Luna?
Yeah, no, I think it had a lot of charm. It's really cute. I think that I'm always kind of like rooting for Enrico, and like I just thought that as like it's cool getting to see someone who has been working in this industry for a while get a chance to do some actual directing and actually prove themselves as being pretty good at it.
Hmm.
Which is what I like because as like I often feel that sometimes a lot of animators think that they're better filmmakers than they actually are. Um, so sometimes it's like they can set out to make something, but it's like your filmmaking actually is not the best. But I like that he didn't overreach with this. So it never like the thing you said about what Teddy Newton said about this film, like it's just yeah, it's like this it's such a manageable scale of a production, and I really respect that in like him as a director.
Yeah, he knows how to be restrained.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing because given that like sometimes with the Pixar ones, they can too easily tumble into like visual excess for the sake of it, where you're like this could be pared back a little bit, but it was totally fine here. I think it was really nice.
Hmm. But yeah, let's move on to our
Yeah.
third nominee, which is A Morning Stroll, directed by Grant
Mhm.
Orchard. This is the first and only nomination for Orchard, as well as producer Sue Goff. I can't find much about Grant Orchard at any point in his life. I know he went to the University of the Creative Arts in Farnham, and I believe he graduated in 2003 or 2005. He has two early shorts on his IMDb
Mm,
page that I believe might be films he made at university, so that's what I'm
mm.
guessing. Uh, from there, there is nothing until his Oscar nomination for A Morning Stroll. And after that, I have plenty of interviews with him about the Sabibi show Hey Dougie, which he created, which appears to be a great success for Orchard and Studio, aka the animation studio that Orchard is associated with. The show currently has 4 seasons and nearly 200 episodes, also garnering multiple BAFTAs and an international Emmy. And speaking of BAFTAs, at least, A Morning Stroll also won a BAFTA for Best Short Animation, so congrats to it. That's about all I can really find about Grant Orchard. So let's move on to the film. Uh, A Morning Stroll depicts a story of a guy seeing a chicken walking around in various animation styles in various time periods, from a 2D black and white silent film style to a colorful 3D CG style, and lastly to a more grim and gritty landscape. Dashiell, what did you think of A Morning Stroll?
So, um, the funny thing is, the name that actually jumped out at me was Sue Goff, because when I was 15, I think, she produced a movie with Studio AK called JoJo and the Stars, which won a BAFTA, and that's kind of what made me want to be an animator.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so when I saw her name, I immediately went, "Oh, Studio AK." It's like, um, and Studio AK, like I remember, I used to want to work with them whenever like I was younger. They were like kind of like the hot studio in London, when I was graduating. And they mostly do advertisements, I think, and the occasional short film. But I say that because I think that background of advertising, you can see that in this short film. You know what I mean? Like the mishmash of styles, slightly style over substance, which is totally fine. I think it looks nice, but you know the I think that it was a uh the middle sequence I think was really well constructed, and I think the styles were all pretty fun. I think that it was maybe a bit thin on the content, but I
Mhm.
didn't mind that so much. I think that it looked quite interesting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like it's a very, very simple film where it's
Yeah,
just like a man sees a chicken, and chicken knocks on the door, chicken is let in. And it tells
yeah,
that in three different ways. Like
yeah.
the first
Well,
version, like I'm
yeah,
just gonna
well, oh yeah, sorry.
oh
Yeah,
you
you
go.
go ahead. No,
Uh
you go ahead.
just
I
giving a
was gonna
basis
quickly.
for the audience. It's just
Yeah,
like first
yeah.
version is just it's just a straightforward telling of the story. Second version, it's like oh he doesn't see the chicken because he's on his phone playing the game. Blah, 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 blah. And then the third version is like the man is actually a zombie and is going to try and eat and kill the chicken. And
It
Ant's
also
like,
like jumps ahead 50 years at a time as well. That's the other thing too, right?
yeah, each
Yeah,
one has a 50-year time jump.
I didn't quite get that, but that's a thing.
Yeah, I I didn't even notice that like the time jump was consistent. I just know old, modern, future.
Yeah, I missed the first one, but I know the second one was 2009. The last one was 2059, so I assume
I
the first one's 1959.
I did remember the first one was 1959. So yeah,
Yeah.
50 years.
So I don't know, like it's very London animation, like, and a lot of London animation is like very too cool for school, like it's cool, style. So like it so fits with what is produced here, especially this kind of short. And like, for instance, like those dates don't mean anything. It's not like a notable 50-year anniversary or something that I can think of off the top of my head that would
Yeah.
correspond to that. My dad was born in 1959, but certainly not commemorating that.
Yeah, and it's
Because
just like it uses 1959 for what is clearly meant to be like a silent film style, and it's just like no, the silent era is long gone by then. So
yeah,
it's
it's
just
like
like
I'm not entirely sure what this idea is or what's going on there, but and it does seem, you know, that's the only connection we have between these. I mean, aside from the repeating incidences, but I don't know why you're supposed to be going. Is it like a history repeating itself thing? And this is what I mean, like style over substance. Like I'm liking this ride. I don't really know what's happening. I don't really
Mhm.
know what I'm supposed to take from it. And like the last one, the full on zombie one, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening, like at all.
So yeah,
Um,
in interviews I read with the director, what he was
mhm,
saying was that so the inspiration for the short came from two places. There was
mhm,
this one short story where it was just a man sees a chicken and that's the end of the story. And
mhm,
the other one was like there was this one book where it's just like it's just a story of a man like who sees like a fight on the bus, but that story is rewritten over like 100 pages, each telling taking up one page. And it's like he was really
okay,
fascinated by that idea of telling the
mhm,
same story in different styles. And
mhm,
so he just wanted to I what I assume is that he wanted to do it this way just to like maybe just like show like contrast and like maybe just get the amusement out of that, showing the different versions. It's like, oh,
yeah,
it's funny how this time he doesn't know it's the chicken because he's on his phone. Oh, it's funny this time because the guy's a zombie. But I think
yeah,
with only three tellings of it, it doesn't work as well. It's just like you need
no,
more
no.
of it.
It's kind of like you know that feature film, The Beaver Trilogy.
No.
It's I don't even know how to describe it. It's this weird ass film. It's like it's set, pretty cult movie, but it's kind of like there's three movies, three versions. That's why it's a trilogy. I think the first one's from like 1989, the second one's from like 1995, and the third one's from like 2000, something like that. That kind of or maybe it's like 1989, 19 or 2000, 2003. And this guy filmed the director filmed like some kid, like a 20-year-old guy or something who he met on a street. And for some reason, he's like utterly fixated on this like one bit of footage that he shot in 1989. Like and it's just like, it's like documentary-esque. Like it's not a thing he's contrived. He remakes it as like a drama in 2000. And I think it had Sean Penn in it or something.
Yeah, I have it pulled up right now. It has Sean
Yeah,
Penn and
yeah.
Crispin Glover.
Crispin Glover. Yeah, I think Crispin's like in one version and Sean Penn's in the next one or something. But it's like kind of he just keeps remaking this thing, but he keeps expanding it. I think in the last one, because it ends up being about 3 hours long, I think. And like the final one, it's like it's this whole odyssey where it's like he's struggling, whatever, and he's like working as a drag queen, I think, or something. There's a bit of like he's in a wig and it's sort of like trans adjacent, but in a vaguey kind of I don't know enough to say what it is or isn't, but just it's kind of like using some of this stuff to evoke things or imply stuff. I don't know, but it's a famously kind of just like weird, interesting, very singular film, you know?
I
Um,
I'm really interested in this now.
yeah, I think the guy who made it, like I have heard an interview, it might be on This American Life as well. Like I remember years ago, and I knew about the film when he appeared on the show already. I think it's in Roger Ebert's like The Great Movies or something. But like he was interviewed just like because the guy isn't like some weird nut. Like he's I think he's like a reasonably working filmmaker. This is like just a thing he's obsessed with. And like he talks about like yeah his the impetus for wanting to remake and why he's so fixated on this one story again and again and again. And it's the point of this tangent obviously going, it feels like something like that is what's going on in this story, but as in where the Beaver trilogy, it's expanding so greatly on everything each time.
Mhm.
Um, with this, it's like I don't quite know what I'm gaining by. I like when it comes together at the end and you see behind the door it's the 50s or something. And I think the middle one is the strongest because I do think the slightly kind of frenetic, not frenetic, the looseness of the middle section I think works really well. You know,
Mhm.
like the oh what's that, a chicken? Oh, I look down my phone. I'll play this game for a bit. Do, and then there's the guy who's coffee he spilled, and then he looks up. Oh yeah, crap! I gotta go back to the other app, and it just that felt like really well observed. I think.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, yeah,
it's a segment with the most like pieces to it, I'd say. It's just like the
yeah,
one that's the most interesting in terms of the story.
yeah,
Me- Meanwhile, like the first one is just it's just meant to be the base telling of the story, and then the next one is just an extended zombie attack. And it's
yeah.
just and I
Like
didn't
oh, you
oh
go
go
go ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
You go,
No,
you go.
I talked for a bit. You talk. You talk.
I was just gonna say it's like I did enjoy this film, but it's also like I was saying before, I just wish that there was a few more iterations of it
Mhm.
so we could really like get more about like what it's like to tell the story again and again, seeing more versions of it. I think
Yeah,
that would be more interesting than what we have here. But at the same time, I still did enjoy it because I do think the second and third segments are pretty funny.
yeah,
They're a good laugh.
yeah. I feel like, I mean, I have no idea about how this movie was made, but like speculating feels like because it was quite a long list of credits as well for like a short film. It was fairly long. So I think what probably happened is they had some downtime in between projects or briefs at Studio AKA, and someone pitched this project, and I think it was like almost as if there's like three sub productions going on within it, you know? And
Mhm.
and it's that Grant Orchard and Sue Goff, like they're basically overseeing this thing, but it's kind of like they gave a bunch of animators like this exercise or something, and they've sort of pooled it together into a short movie.
Maybe.
That's like it just it's because it the middle one feels like an advertisement. Like it just this feels like it's the work of animators that primarily work in advertising rather than filmmakers, you know? And it I think that's part of the reason why it's a little bit disjointed. I think that maybe sometimes when stuff gets award nominations, especially like the Oscars, it can be subject to scrutiny and speculation that maybe the work was never intended to be subjected
Yeah.
to, you know? It can be a small piece of work and you're like, that got nominated? And it's like, it was never really meant to be here.
Yeah,
Um,
it's always funny when like somebody's just like thesis film and when they're
yeah,
in college gets an Oscar nomination. And it's just like this wasn't meant to be this big.
exactly, exactly. And it's like the work can be totally fine, but it becomes a case of like, it's like, is it fair for it to be like for instance, like I think of a lot about the 2020 Oscars that year when everything was impacted by COVID. So it meant that the ceremony was dominated by kind of weird movies like Minari got law nominations,
Mhm.
Promising Young Woman, like movies which aren't necessarily Oscary, and in a normal year, not nearly as many as would get through. And I think that some of these movies, they are what they are, but I feel that for movies say like Promising Young Woman, which is a messy movie, um, it is what it is. I think it got subject to a level of scrutiny that I don't think it was ever intended to be subjected to. Like it was a $10 million movie or whatever, and suddenly everyone's expecting it to be the definitive single text on the subject of sexual abuse or something. You know, you're just like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, oh boy. And I think that's kind of what happened here a bit.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, though I don't agree with the promising young woman
No, no,
comparison,
no, 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 no.
but I get what you're saying.
No, sorry, like I'm not saying it's a movie without like I'm not saying that it's a movie that like it should not be criticized. I'm saying that like it's like if this was a movie that like you'd heard was like really provocative at Sundance or something, and you've watched it like 7 years later and you're going, oh, Carey Mulligan was all right in that, but you know, you're going, don't know how I feel about the rest of the movie, but it's different whenever it's literally an Oscar-winning movie. You know what I mean? Like there's a
Yeah.
it changes how these things are viewed. Or maybe a less provocative example would be like La La Land, where it's like La La Land's totally fine. I think I don't like it, but I don't think it deserves to be alongside Titanic and All About Eve as the most Oscar-nominated movies
Yeah.
in history. You know,
Or
it's
or
not
like
fair. Yeah,
Coda, where it's just like
yeah,
it's just this rinky-dinky little generic this story about like, oh, do I choose music or do I choose my family? And it's like
yeah,
perfectly servable indie drama comedy. But then now that it's won Best Picture, it's just like, what are you doing here?
yeah. It's like so you're saying that this is in the same league as Lawrence of Arabia, which like and anything can be criticized, but you know, you just sort of like, okay, okay. I don't know if I agree, but okay.
And I just think it's fun that we're comparing A Morning Stroll to Promising Young Woman and Coda.
Yeah. But that's
This this is just a it's it's just a little thing. Yeah, it's a nice little movie. I enjoyed
yeah,
it.
no, it's totally fine. I think that like if I was, but I stand by what I say. Like I think that maybe it shouldn't be. It maybe shouldn't doesn't deserve to be to have this kind of scrutiny. If I was at like a film festival and this came on, I'd be like, this is fun. It's like cool. I like this. It's
Yeah.
wacky. But in terms of like the you know the Academy Awards, I don't know if it fits. I think it totally deserves its BAFTA win. That's definitely the case. It's cool in that respect.
It doesn't deserve an Oscar, but it deserves a BAFTA.
Like, I am British.
I just like the structuring of it. It's just
Yeah. No, as in like, stuff can be really cool within the country that produced it. I think sometimes it's like if you're saying that this is like representative of our film industry, it's like maybe not, but whatever. It's totally fine.
yeah,
I had a good time.
yeah. But what this really is, or like what it should be, is just like a film that like somebody just like I imagine just like some independent animator makes it by themselves, puts it on
Mm.
YouTube, and it goes viral because it's a
Yeah.
funny little thing. I think that's what this film really was meant. Like, well, maybe
Yeah,
not
yeah,
what it was meant
totally.
as, but
Yeah.
what it feels like and what it should be.
Yeah, that's exactly me when I was speculating that like I feel this was like a downtime project. I don't think they're setting out to make like an Academy Award nominated movie,
Mhm.
in the way that um I mean maybe no one ever does think that, but like La Luna feels more like a movie that would be, oh, this would be this is my awards project, like it
Yeah,
it feels just a little bit more worthy. Um no, not just the the end result, but like in its intent.
yeah, yeah. Like Pixar, of course, at this point, they know that they are likely going to get awards
Oh
for
yeah, yeah.
these movies, or at least going to get nominated because
Yeah.
at this point, it's just like it seems like every time they make a short film, it gets an Oscar nomination, if
Yeah,
not more.
completely. Like the
Yeah.
the principle I said before, like their short films are easily the most watched films that year. So it's like, you ask anyone to name a short film that's at that year, chances are it's going to be a Pixar one. Like that's just,
Mhm.
you a given almost.
Yeah. Uh, And I also just like how the interviews or whatever that I read, it's like, so in my doing my research, there's this website that does like interviews of like with the different directors that have been nominated each
Mhm.
year, which is insanely helpful for my
Sure.
research for this. But
Oh,
just like
absolutely.
for the Casa Rosa one, it's like they ask him like what's it like to join the pantheon of other Pixar nominees rather than the other people that are just like, what's it like to be nominated?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's
There's
like
the,
there's a
the
different expectation there.
yeah, there's a photo I always love. I actually can't remember who it is, but like it's from 2014 or something, and it's like it's the guy, one of the guys who's nominated for best animated short or something, and he's like on the red carpet, but obviously he's a nobody, right? Like he's next to like Nicole Kidman or someone, and it's like so it's just a slightly wider photo where there's like a PA or something holding up like a sheet, and it says the guy's name, best animated short. So it's just like, and
Oh
obviously
my
any
God.
photo you ever see that in press, it's cropped, and I'm assuming they do that for everyone within reason. Like Nicole Kidman doesn't need to be carded, but like they're doing that for the cinematographers and the screenwriters as well, I'm sure. But it's also just because the people who are nominated for screenwriting and cinematography, it's like, yeah, but you're in the film industry, you're on set with Nicole Kidman. You may not talk to her, you may not like be on her level, but like, whereas animation people are weird people in rooms. I just found it tickled me.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the short film category
Yeah,
specific. It's like these are people who, in any other context, would have no reason being at the Oscars,
yeah.
but now they are, and when if they win, they're put on the stage in front of millions of people and get to say whatever the hell they want.
Oh, it can be so painful, but also sometimes intoxicating because you're used to the people that know how to give a speech, and like everyone loves to criticize about an Oscar speech, about how artificial it is. It's like, yeah, you haven't seen someone die, you haven't seen a production designer die on stage because they are not public speakers, you
It's
know?
like we get things like the guy who thanked his parent. We have like the last year with oh, what was it? It's the Irish one, but it's like they sang happy birthday
Yeah.
for the guy who was in
Oh
the
my
film.
God. Yeah.
And it's just and like one of my favorite examples is the documentary winner from like 2010 is where it's like one producer comes on stage and the other producer
Oh, the
shoves him
fight.
out of the
Yeah.
way and just
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
the
They
speech is
they
just
had a
so
huge
awkward.
falling out, and they just like, this is demented. Like it's like why are you behaving like peasants? It's like it's
Yeah,
great.
if that happened at Best Picture, it's just like they would like play nice for the cameras, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
not with the
I
short
love it
films.
so much. It's because it just every now and then it's just great. It's great, you know.
It's it's so nice to see it. And of course, like there's the one where like Zbigniew Rybczynski, who like he has this terrible Oscar speech and gets arrested immediately after for picking a fight with a security guard. It's great. Love this category.
Terrific.
But anything else you'd like to say about A Morning Stroll?
No, I thought that it was a totally 2011 London-made animated short that was enjoyable.
I think I saw something that said exactly that on Letterboxd. It's like this is the most 2011 thing I've seen.
Yeah, like it's so of the trend in a way that's totally fine. It's fine.
Exactly. All right, so we'll move on to our fourth nominee,
Oh,
which is Sunday or
oh,
Dimanche by Patrick Doyon. This is the first and only nomination for Doyon. I think it's Doyon, or I'm not sure how it's pronounced totally, but I
oh
think it's Doyon.
gosh. Well, it's
Uh,
also because he's what I'm guessing he's like French Canadian, right?
oh,
So
he
it's
is
gonna
definitely Quebecois.
yeah, so it's gonna be even stranger.
Doyon.
But yeah, we'll do our best. I don't think either of us are French speakers.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I'm not. Uh, Normally, I would look up how to pronounce it, but I just didn't think about it until right now. It's just like, oh God, there's multiple ways to pronounce this.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I do an okay job. Anyway, uh, first nomination for Doyon, but the 32nd nomination for the National Film Board of Canada. Doyon is, of course, Quebecois and studied animation at the University of Quebec in Montreal, graduating in 2006. He views himself as both an illustrator and an animator in equal part, though on the animation front, Sunday is his only film. But he instead does animation for plenty of art installations, as featured on his website, and he's even tried his hand at making video games, like we mentioned before, making a short itch.io game called Pet Cemetery. But we're here to talk about his brief stint in professional cinematic animation. Sunday bases itself partly on Doyon's memories of growing up in Quebec, but simultaneously is not an autobiographical piece, visualizing where childlike imagination can go. It was made entirely with traditional ink and paper animation, which is a nice change of pace. Doyon found the hardest part being to come up with the actual style of the film, finding exactly what he wanted the whole thing to look like. He kept redesigning the main boy of the film over and over again until he found something simple and likable and then built the entire film around the boy. In Sunday, we see the average life of a Quebecois child on a Sunday. The big train runs through the middle of town. He goes to church, visits his grandma, and witnesses the violent deaths of various animals while being taunted by crows. Uh, I like this one. I'm liking all of these nominees this year, but it's just like this is just a very cute, simple, like little slice of life story, and it just has this really nice world building. It's like you can really feel
Mm.
it feels lived in, I guess is maybe the right word, maybe not, but it's just like I can sense so much more about the world than what's
Yeah.
being shown to me on screen, which is a very, very good thing. It's like it is a tad boring. It is a tad light, but it's also just I very much just enjoyed the time I spent inside this world. And I really liked it. Maybe I should go to visit Quebec sometime. I don't know. But how about you, Dashiell?
I adored this. I thought it was so good. It reminded me a lot of Guy Delisle's comics, like another Quebecois. God, what was that? Quebecois animator, illustrator. He did you know that comic Pyongyang? He does like a lot of like journally comics about usually his time in very different, very extreme cultures. He has one about called the Burma Chronicles. He has one about Shenzhen. He has one called Jerusalem. Like they're pretty good, but it's a very similar style actually visually to this, but also like tone.
Mhm.
And like it's just more that I feel like some of this is like is this just like what is this just like what it's like to be Quebecois?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But like I thought this was really nice. I don't think I didn't find it so much boring because I thought that as much as maybe there wasn't everything always felt like something was happening and it always felt like how to put this. I didn't have a very nice childhood and I don't romanticize childhood that much. Um, so I don't always have patience for stuff or sentiment that does. But what I liked about this was it showed childhood from the perspective of and memories of being a child very strongly without being too rose tinted, while
Hmm.
also make like fondly remembering things, but also like I just felt that like the very good point to me about like animal deaths and stuff, like the constant presence of violence, but it never felt like adolescent because also it's that thing too when you're a kid where your parents will spend so much time trying to shield you from like, how violent the world is, yet you weirdly stuff falls through the cracks. Like I am haunted to this day by the time I found like a dead rat in our garden as a kid. And it's just like it's such a non-thing, really. Or like when you see a dead bird when you're a kid, it's just like these things that really just like affect you or something or just impact you. And I think that this thing did that quite well as too, or Sunday did this quite well as well.
Hmm.
Um, I just thought as well, like even like as soon as we first saw that town in the first shot, I was like, I'm in. This looks
Hmm.
great. This sense of style.
And the
And
big
then when
black
the
train
and
running
then the
through and everything.
train, like when the train runs through, I'm like going, oh, this is it. I love this. This is great. Yeah, no, I thought this was wonderful. I thought this like I liked the kid. He didn't feel like he felt specific yet general, didn't feel overwritten. Nothing felt like overdeveloped or overwritten, which was really nice. Um it showed us without telling. And ironically, as much as when I said this is one of those times where like whenever I've said before that a movie needs like just some language of any description, narration, dialogue, something. This is one of those times where like going absolutely not. It doesn't need a single thing. It's just
Mhm.
like the intentionality is all there. Everything is being needs to be said is being said. I don't feel I'm watching this and kind of going, I need this to move faster. Like I was just like, no, I'm this pacing is terrific for what's being said.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I do really enjoy the world we're in, and it's just like but I feel like I'm personally missing something. Like it's not a flaw in the film, but it's just like I feel like there's something more to this that I'm just not getting, especially with
Yeah.
regards to the the bear that is
Yeah.
like stuck in the wall, and then he gets unstuck and then gets run over by the train, and I'm
Yeah.
just like there's something that this is meant to be, but I don't know what it is. And it's just like, and there is the constant theme of death, not just the fact that, things keep dying, but also the big black train. Death is often
Mhm.
called like a black train that's coming. And
Mhm.
then it's like the family is dressed in mostly black. Like it looks like they're going to a funeral, even though they're not.
It's
Like
just Sunday dinner, yeah.
yeah, it's like Sunday mass and then hanging out at grandma's house. But it also could, it also feels like a funeral where it's like you go to the
Mhm.
funeral ceremony, then go to the after party at the house. Like it's almost as if like grandma's husband had just died, but
Mhm.
there's no indication that that just happened.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just like there's, I just don't know what's going on with the fucking bear. It's just
Yeah.
like, why is the bear?
Yeah, like I guess my kind of I suppose let me think. Because like I think by that point I was like going, cool, what else is gonna happen? Love it. Love a bear, you know? It's
Like,
like
like maybe it is just like silly bear that also happens to get run over
you
by a
you
fucking train. But
you do make a very good point though. You're right because like as much as before it's stylized but like realist, like nothing too wacky. This is full fantasy like nonsense. I suppose the thing that was evocative for me is that I've been to this event as a kid, like at this exact pitch of like boredom where the adults are all there having fun but not doing anything. They just stand and talk, and you're like, this is what's happening. And you're kind of going, I just want to go home. Want to go home. This is
mhm,
boring. Want to go home. And I think maybe that's what this is a level of like just like I just want to have fun. Can I have fun? So like the bit at the start when he's like, putting
pressing the
the
coins.
coins on the yeah. And like immediately like his mom like yanks him. You're like, I think that that's maybe what this all is, where it's like is this like he's really bored and kids aren't good at like sucking it up and being bored, like there's mass. I hated going to mass like as a kid because I was like, this is really boring. This is really boring.
Mhm.
Um, and it kind of there's something about just that kind of banality. I don't know if it's like I grew up in the west of Ireland, which is like I think it's not as weird as Quebec, but it's a pretty weird place. And there is
Nothing's as
something.
weird as Quebec.
I mean, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I mean, freaking nothing is as weird as Quebec. But you know what, we had our own separatist movement, so it's like we've a lot of stuff in common with, how hatred of the British Crown and stuff. There's stuff there. Um, but anyway, I just something about the setting and the exact mood just felt very like familiar to me, like, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So like maybe I was responding to that a little bit. Um, um, yeah, because I don't know if that's like something that's like not relatable to you at all, but it kind of was for me. Maybe that made me more willing to sort of go along with like when stuff gets wacky, because like I don't think I was an especially like imaginative kid, but like I have a very strong memory of like being convinced that like a lion had like escaped and was running around like our suburban neighborhood. And I'm convinced that I saw one. Like I saw it and it roared across the street. Like it's like I can still see it now, but I'm like, that's nonsense. Like that didn't happen. Like that couldn't have happened.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess what I'm saying is that like sometimes, yeah, some of these things just make sense. Maybe it's like the desperate like longing for like anything to happen when you're a
Yeah.
kid and you're bored in a situation where you're being told to because he's not even like it's not like he's told to behave. It's not even that he's misbehaving. It's just that he's bored, right? Like
Yeah.
that was my reading of it.
Yeah.
Um,
He's just a very bored kid in a very boring city.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and I think that that's and if like me you don't like especially romanticized childhood, that's like yeah, I hated childhood. I wanted to be a grown up, like it. So like that, but at the same time, it's like you can still, from the perspective of adulthood, like look back at childhood and with some fondness about that feeling that you had, like similarly, like an adult writer can write a story about first love, knowing that my first love was a disaster. Everyone's first love is a disaster, and you can still write about it with perspective, but it's still but the characters can still be like, this is the greatest love that there's ever been. Like you can have that multifaceted perspective. I think even if it's a thing that you're like going, oh God, my first boyfriend, just
Mhm.
like what was I thinking? Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you're a really great guest. I really like having you on.
oh,
You have
thank
so much
you.
to say. Um, but it's like I don't really have anything to respond with, but I did want to talk about something else, which is like just
Cool, cool.
get into the like the specter of death as it appears in
Yeah.
this film, and specifically like going back to the ending with the bear and the train. It's like
Mhm.
before the bear like removes itself from the wall, there's a little moment where it's like the boy walks out of the house, goes over the train tracks, he places the coin down, and then he like lays his head down on the track as well. And
Mhm.
it's just like even though it's like part of me is thinking it's like he's just listening for when the train's gonna come, because like what I imagine is
Yeah.
like this is the most interesting part of his day when he gets
Yeah.
when the train comes, crushes the coin, he gets the little coin. But part of me was like, is he gonna kill himself? Is he that bored that he just wants to fucking get run over by a train himself? Because like he places his head down like exactly the same way that he places the coin down, which
Mhm.
might just be because he's placing it on the rail. That's where it has to go in order to both listen and both put the coin. But part of me is just like, is he that suicidal? That is there? He's
Mhm.
just so bored that nothing's happening. And then right then is like when the bear comes out, like feels like the shaking of the bear trying to get out. Like that's
Mhm.
what takes him off the rail. Looks over at the bear and sees what's happening. And but yeah, th-
That's
th-
really interesting. Because like yeah, like I don't know if it's necessarily like a death wish, but I think maybe it, I think so. I think it is literally trying to listen to when the train is coming. That's what I think
okay,
is happening. But going down like a more a different like a more lateral like interpretation of it, I do think there is something in what you're saying. But I think it's maybe more like risk, different perspective. Like I didn't do this, but like I remember when I was growing up, we lived like in a village that was outside a town that 22,000 people lived in. So the village had about 800 people in it. Which is to say that like cars went by, but it's not like it was laden with traffic. But like, kids would like to like lie down in the middle of the roads as like a bit of a dare type thing, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and it's like I don't think these kids wants to kill themselves, but there's just something to that in it, I think. But also like I remember when I was a kid, I used to have like a really strong urge that I loved lying on the floor.
Hmm.
In that like because everything seemed even bigger and it was about to me it was about seeing different perspectives. And I guess that like I think you can make of that moment what you want. I don't know what it is or isn't per se, but I don't think my reading of it is like I'm less inclined to say like it's about a suicide ideation thing, but it's definitely in an environment, yeah, where death is like a component of this, but I think it's more just like yeah, like risk or something.
Okay. Yeah, or
But
he just wants the train to come so the coin can get crushed. It's
yeah,
like there's different ways to look at it.
yeah, and I think it's also that um like okay, so like I was raised Catholic very badly, only because in Ireland, like Catholicism is a national religion. So it means that you can kind of like slide under the radar a bit. So like paid all the lip service, did the communion stuff, but like I'm just like, this is nonsense. And like,
I was
or I'd
the
be
same
like,
way.
yeah, so it's there's a I think it's Radio Days, the Woody Allen movie, where he has this like aunt that's like a radical leftist communist, and he says like in voiceover, "Yeah, my aunt, I can't remember her name, Beatrice, like she said that God didn't exist, or that the Bible didn't make sense because of like poor narrative structure." And it's like, but it's like it's that kind of thing to me as a kid, where I'm going, "Huh, a lot of wacky stuff happened 2,000 years ago, and then not much else for like quite a while."
Hmm.
And I'm supposed to like really, but anyway, it's like as a kid, this is what I'm thinking about this, and don't worry, I'm coming to something with this. But like what I'm trying to say is that like with this kid's perspective where your viewpoint is like you're just your small world and of a larger world, whether in this kid's case it's via religion, my case again Catholic doctrine. um uh the only outside thing this kid has is the railroad, that he knows that there is something that connects this place to a larger world, and
Oh,
yeah. Um, Also, I grew up in a town that was a railroad terminal, so who knows? Maybe I'm really responding to this, but
you just
it's
love trains.
I freaking love trains. But like I do think though there's just something about this kid and something bigger than him, and the things that respond to him versus the things that don't, right? And I think that I feel that it may not be one-to-one biographical, but these are what I'm trying to say is that I feel that with oh God, I'm trying to look up his name with Patrick Doyon, like I feel that this is maybe yeah his vague memories of his childhood rather than like this is my child, but feelings that he had at that time, and they feel very relatable and understandable to me, where it's like you're kind of reconciling where do I fit in this world that I'm trying to figure out. Like, I can't just ask the grown-ups because no, you're not getting what I'm specifically asking. Like, you'll say this because you have your grown-up perspective and you know how the world actually works. But this stuff is really new to me and I don't really understand it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and so it sort of just feels like it's kind of this is actually one of those times where, unlike with the Fantastic Flying books, like the vagueness and ambiguity works in its favor because I'm like, cool, I'm having fun like sitting in this rather than I have no idea what I'm trying to learn here.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely get that. And this
Yeah.
whole conversation is making me appreciate the film a lot more. And it's
Mhm.
like I even raised it in my rankings just now, just because it's like, yeah, this is a really good movie.
Yeah, like it felt really well constructed, I think, in that there's like so my partner's a screenwriter, and he and I like sometimes debate a lot about like storytelling and structure and stuff. And I am of the mindset that I don't care that much about plot. I really like characters, and I'm okay with like a story that has a weak plot, but like really fun characters. And I don't mind a story that's like there's no real plot. It's that there's a character, a thing happens, a thing happens, a thing happens, a thing happens, you know? I think sometimes a lot of filmmakers, especially early filmmakers, I also think heterosexual men are really prone to this, where they'll really be like the plot, the structuring, and you're like, I don't care, just give me a sassy lady and I'll be. But like as in like to make a really serious point about like um people go on and on about George Lucas and his love affair with like with Campbell and stuff and like hero's journey and all
Yeah,
that stuff and how
Math
it
a
applies
Thousand
to Star
Faces.
Wars. Yeah, all that stuff. And like it is there. Don't get me wrong. And he studied it and he knows what he's doing, but like that isn't what makes Star Wars great. The story is quite basic, like to the point of one dimensionality almost. What makes it work is you have this backbone of a very simple, very clear story, but you have this trifecta of Leia, Han, and Luke with Ford, Fisher, and Hamill in those roles, and they all feel alive and they're all sparking against each other. Leia is the most important of them all, I think, because Leia is the kind of character that could very easily be done really badly, where most people would be like going, I'm the princess, where she'd just be kind of like hoity and haughty and like kind of flat. But the fact that she's an utter brat is what makes like people, especially girls, I think, respond to her. Like it's not just that she's competent and all that, it's that she has dimensionality and a soul, in a way that um makes this work. And I think that's more important in this kind of story. And that's why I think that like Sunday has, where this little kid who's very thinly written, I'm like going, I like you, you're a weird kid. I want to hang out with you. Um and
Yeah.
I'm happy just to follow him, like again the thing I said before about I'm happy with him like God, these adults are so boring. Like I feel that, and I'm an adult and I feel the way around adults in these
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah. And that's also why,
So
like,
yeah.
in the prologue, it's like I mentioned, it's like Doyon spent so long perfecting the main
Mhm.
child because it's like he need just in animation in general, but like you need that design to perfectly encapsulate what this kid is, how he feels so
Yeah,
much about his character in just a simple design.
yeah,
But like when you once you have that, you can build everything else around it.
completely. I think that as much as I said like the urge of like avoiding overdevelopment in animation, where I'm like, no, this in this case it was absolutely correct to spend a long time because you need to like that kid not
Mhm.
only from what he does, but how he looks from the instant. Because if you don't get off to that right foot, he'll never snag you. Like, the film will never hook you.
But yeah, it's like the two kinds of overdevelopment. The kind before where it's just like it where it sands off the edges, but
Mhm.
this kind where it's like adding more layers.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And I think it helps that, like in the credits, because like Doyon, it's like it says the end, like, he wrote, direct, animate, like he is the sole creative voice pretty much
Hmm.
at every level of this production. I think that's what really makes it okay in this situation, that like it isn't just like um not that every artistic endeavor has to be a dictatorial type thing, but you often you have to be careful of seeking too much input or stuff being done by committee, because then it's a bit like, well, who's saying anything?
Hmm.
Um, I think it was definitely the correct choice here.
Yeah, and that's the problem before, like when we're talking about like certain like Pixar stuff, is where it's
Mhm.
like there's just too many hands in the room, and it's just like they're
Yeah,
all trying to do something, and it's just like it all just gets turned into this mush.
yeah. Like the this isn't a Pixar thing, it's a Disney thing, but I to this day, like when I was finishing up in my BA in college, like Frozen was like on the horizon. They were talking about this Snow Queen movie that they're going to make, and it's going to be a 2D movie. It's going to be amazing. Um, and then The Princess and the Frog came out and wasn't as successful as they wanted, so they're like going, "Oh crap, we got to retool this." But like what I always am like haunted by is I mean everyone's seen the Frozen production art, right? The really
Yeah,
early stuff where it was like the Snow
where
Queen,
like
and you've got
Elsa
like
is like the villain and things like that, and
yeah, and like she
because these
looks
really
like
cool designs.
yeah, she looks like Auntie Mame, it's like it's got this quality to it where it's like, I'm your Auntie Mame, like which is like but like, and it's like, oh, this is friggin' great. We're gonna have like an Ursula-esque drag queen, fabulous woman just being fabulous, and like that's exciting. But then it's totally fine for things to develop. It's not that this is some lost masterpiece, but from my mind, it just feels a bit it's hard for me to take on ideas that this movie is somehow a progression when you're back to female character whose waist is smaller than her head. Like
Hmm.
it's and it's not that that can't be stylish. It can be fun to have like a stylish thing, but with this, you're like, I and I'm not the target audience. I understand
Yeah.
that too, but like like I get that, but I guess maybe more so like, but what I can say is like, as someone who could possibly work on one of these things, like this doesn't fill me with ins inspiration for my potential career.
Yeah.
And I think that's a valid criticism of that.
Oh, definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, anything else you'd like to say about Sunday, though? I feel like we're getting towards the end of
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. No. This one I thought was beautiful. Like it was also the last one I watched. So I was like, oh, love it. Love it. Great time. 10 out of 10.
Well, then we'll move on to
Yeah.
our other Canadian nominee and our fifth and final nominee, which is Wildlife, directed by Amanda Forbes and Wendy Tilby. This is the second nomination for Forbes and the third nomination for Tilby, as well as the 33rd nomination for the National Film Board of Canada. Now, Tilby and Forbes are constantly dismayed at just how long it takes them to make movies. Even though they are two people, their last few films have taken them upwards of 4 years to make. But luckily, we live in the modern age of computer animation, so they can speed up the process a bit with computers. Or so they thought. The duo were never satisfied with the look of the digital animation they tried for this film, so they still painted frames mainly with real paints. But they could still use computers to help with the actual animation and compositing and editing, and they did, but it did not speed things up. This film still took 7 years to complete due to them also needing to, make money, and they took on some commercial work in order to keep themselves afloat. But hopefully next time they can make a film quicker, and please do not look up when their next film, The Flying Sailor, came out. In any case, Wildlife is about a remittance man, a 20-something Englishman who goes to Canada to find himself a job and stake a claim in the new world, and also live out his cowboy fantasies. And there will surely be no downsides to this. Dashiell, what did you think of our final nominee?
I thought this was really good. I thought that this was it makes a lot of sense that this is by established filmmakers because like the actual filmmaking, the quality of the filmmaking was really high. The voice, the point of view, really, really good. Like it didn't feel like I love their economy. Like, they would have shots of like talking head stuff, but then they just have shots of like food and things. I just like it was an exciting montage.
Hmm.
And I think they managed a nice line of like story like this touches on a lot of things, depending on how large you want to go with it. Imperialism, colonialism, are definitely lurking in this background, right? Chauvinism even, but like I think that they managed to do it in a tone that was amusing and evoking it while not making it be the story too much, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like the
like
fact
keeping it
that
focused, but also still touching on these broader concepts.
yeah, because what I would say is that like, being from a country that was colonized, Ireland,
Hmm.
not as much as many other countries were colonized and more horrifically, I understand. But a perspective that people often don't appreciate about the nature of colonialism is that the people that do the colonizing are often the people that are there because they flopped out of the culture that they're actually from. So it's not exactly their best and brightest either.
Hmm.
So the fact that this guy is like an absolute boob is, and they talk about there's just tons of these idiot Englishmen that like want to be cowboys. I think that was a really good insight. Um, because obviously so much discussion about things like colonialism is from the perspective of the people that have been colonized, and it's about more so the cultures that colonize them, like in that like the English ruling class and stuff. So I thought that that was I may be drifting away from the a bit too much into something else, but I found that amusing. I think it's nice seeing I think it's nice seeing Englishmen get owned in colonial settings because of their own hubris.
Yeah.
What can I say?
Yeah. Uh,
But because and that's it though, like it actually and alongside that really what I think is that really rather serious point, I think it also did a good job of like humanizing this guy too in a way where it's like you are so ill-equipped to be here.
mhm.
And I think it did a good job of making you don't want to say sympathize because probably someone like that doesn't deserve to be sympathized with, but you know there is like you do feel like the pathos, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it is a weird kind of tragedy when it's just like this didn't have to happen. You didn't
Yeah.
have to come here. You didn't have to end up like this.
Yeah.
But I just want to talk about my story with this movie for a
Cool,
little
cool.
bit. So
Yeah, totally.
so I've this podcast is my second time running through all the best animated short nominees. I first did it like a few years ago, I think like in 2020. And when I first watched this movie, I gave it 2 stars because, and I think it's it's indicative of like the way I was watching these movies, which is like
Mhm.
I was watching them 20 at a time, like at 2 hour
Sure.
stretches, just like, and I don't think I was giving every single film the due diligence to like really pay
Mhm.
attention to them. And it's just like, and films like this suffer from that because it's like this film was first of all 15 minutes and it's not exactly the most exciting thing. It's not the most, and it's not everything is surface level for it.
Mhm.
And so when I first watched it, I gave it 2 stars. I did not like it at all. Oh, but when watching for the podcast, first of all, I'm only watching 5 films at a time. And
Mhm.
I specifically need to pay attention to these movies in order to be able to talk about them on the podcast.
Mhm.
And that paying actual attention to this movie really made me like it a lot more. And this is like one of the best films in this line. I won't say if it is
Yeah.
the best, but it's certainly up there.
Yeah.
And because I was just so invested in this. Like I did not know what a remittance man was. Like when I was
Mhm.
reading descriptions, like writing the paragraph first, I was just like, what does this word mean? But then watching a movie and just like
Yeah.
it's just like and the story that unfolds here. And it's like, first of all, I love how pathetic and how awful they make this guy seem because
Yeah.
it's like, yes, this is just a fucking terrible human being who,
I mean it when I say like he's a boob. Like that's just like it's just like
yes,
you're a Bertie Wooster type. Like you have no skills and you're here because you flopped out of England. Like
exactly. And it's like I like the comet metaphor that they keep bringing up throughout the movie. Like it wasn't good enough to be part of a planet, so it just keeps on hurling through space.
yeah.
And it's like so that's the man coming to Canada or whatever. And it's just like how it emphasizes like they get on the land and it's just like they want to be cowboys, but they still end up just playing polo the whole
Mhm.
time or whatever, or and badminton. And it's just like and then as the film goes on, it's like we hear like the guy's letters to his family and we see the contrast. Like he's like, "Oh, I have such a great land or whatever." And he's living in a fucking outhouse.
Yeah.
And it's just like and you see the contrast. And then as the film goes on, it's like it becomes less about just hating this fucking guy and just realizing how fucking awful this decision was for him, how fucking miserable he is. His and it's like I really love the one scene like when he goes over the train tracks, he just walks
Mhm.
over and then he just shoots out a gun on it. It's just like it's such a simple moment, but first of all, just
Mhm.
the way like the different frames, the way it's shot is just so engaging, and like the watching the bullet fly across and everything,
Yeah.
it's so good. But and then just like as things get worse and worse, and then of course the ending, which uh, this is spoil like this we're open about spoilers here. When he
Yeah.
fucking kills himself, or at least I think that's what's meant to be implied. They don't
At the very least you can say he dies.
yeah,
You know.
he dies and the mountains are like reporting on him or whatever. And it's just like God, and, like that last letter where it's just like give the best to the family or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just God, this is it's terrible, but it's amazing. I love
Yeah.
this movie. So fucking good.
Yeah, no, no,
Uh,
it's really, really good. Like this is what I mean by saying like the filmmaking voice is so assured, like they know what it is they're trying to say, and they say it with such a deft hand. And it's just such good, like because they are taking advantage of this medium in the best way, and they're also not just being gratuitous, you know, like it's in that like there isn't just like excessively animated sequences that are just, you know, beautifully technically adept. It's like so much of it is like, and the stuff I was saying before about like the talking head interview bits are really effective because it's like, oh, cool, we've got this thing where a woman that's clearly a local, like just is like, fucking hate these English guys, they're idiots, and
Mhm.
it's like, and that's all we need to know. Like it's just a talking head, like it's not anything that. Whereas I feel if you didn't have the tool of like spoken words like that, you would have to have a whole sequence where he goes to the trading post, tries to get something. You got shots of every, you're just going, this, why
Mhm.
is this taking so long? This could be conveyed a lot faster, Whereas with in that one thing alone, it's like, oh, these people are marginalized, like they're not liked at all.
Yeah.
Um, which I think is really good.
Yeah, it's like that conversation about like the difference between visual storytelling and using dialogue is also a conversation about
Yeah.
efficiency versus like giving the time and space, because sometimes you want to who do like that more elongated sequence, like give
Mhm.
the space to it, but sometimes you just need that quick response.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when we're setting the scene, right? Because like I know that so there's this really good series of, do you know the Solitude trilogy?
The what?
The Solitude trilogy. It's a series of radio documentaries Glenn Gould did in the 60s.
Oh, no clue.
They're really good. They're really, really good. And one of them is called The Idea of North. And it's like this, they're for like the CBC, and they're really good. It's like The Idea of North is, I think it's my favorite one, but it's kind of like this interesting meditation on what the North means to Canadians, because most Canadians all live within the border and they don't know when their country really ends. Like psychologically, they don't quite understand it because it's just, no one goes above a certain latitude. And so it's, when you're from a country where it's like I grew up on an island, even though we have a partition on it, it's like our borders haven't changed much ever. So we have this clear idea about what our realm is, and to except, although interestingly in Ireland, because there is Northern Ireland, the Republic doesn't have a north. It has a northwest, it has a Midlands, it has an east, it has a west. It doesn't have a north. The north is the North, capital N. Even though the north of the Republic, which is a place, which would be a thing that exists, doesn't exist. That's the Midlands.
Mhm.
And it's kind of just like how these things inform like the psychology of the people. And I guess I kind of had that in my mind when watching this film a bit, just like this sort of like, it's a thing that like Canadians like are kind of like dwelling on a bit, in a way it's really interesting, in a way that someone who is not a Canadian, an Englishman, like will just like not get that.
Mhm. Yeah, in the interviews I was reading about it,
Mhm.
it's just like I think that the idea came from like either Tilby or Forbes, like just talking to like their parents or something, and it's just
Mhm.
like how it's about how like the remittance men aren't really well known, not even like in Canada, and it's just like,
Mhm.
and while the Americans, like we have this great mythology about the
Yeah.
cowboys, that like people who move out west, they manifest destiny and all that. It's like this kind of history in Canada is not told because,
Mhm.
well, partly because it is a bit more pathetic, but also it's just like I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. But um yeah, I don't even remember where I was going with this. But I just do think it is a fascinating contrast.
Yeah, I think that, like, you know sorry, I feel like I made the conversation about colonialism really on, but I think to me it's really hard not to think that
Oh
that's
yeah,
what's.
that's very much what this is all
It's
about.
like sure, we're not seeing like a lot of like repressed First Nations people, but I do think that the spirit is what's informing this, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's like, it reminds me a lot of A Passage to India,
Yes.
specifically the David Lean film rather than the novel.
I watched
Um,
the movie, yes.
yeah, and I think the movie is flawed. I think the first half is much better than the second half. But one thing I really love about the first half of that movie is that it's not hard to paint the English as villains in any colonial setting. Truly isn't. You don't have to work that hard. And what I love about Passage to India is that, because obviously the second half of it hinges on prejudice and stuff, it's not like we get a lot of scenes, say, in the first half of the English, say, being horribly physically abusive to their staff and stuff. It's just they're all insidiously awful in lots of small ways. So you're just like, you're like, they're all kind of horrible. But you're going, no, these people are disgusting. These people are absolutely awful. And like, and you know that, you feel that implicitly, right? But
Mhm.
it's never like you never get this one bit where just to showcase it, they'll have the viceroy's wife having some servant beaten or something. Like we don't get something as visually clear as that, but we just get lots of subtle things where you're like, oh, awful, awful, awful. Every one of these people is awful.
Mhm.
And I feel that this does it quite well too. There isn't like an obvious thing, like, you get these subtle bits, like the presence of Gilbert and Sullivan being played. It's just like these things where just like, yeah, all these English virtues and stuff, and it's not they're not doing anything explicitly horrible, but you're going, you're awful. My partner and I, we have a fondness for Gilbert and Sullivan, but we've never actually like listened to any of it. But just as a touchstone, it like comes up so often, and
Mhm.
it's always like it's specifically that great episode of The West Wing when like Ainsley Hayes is running around you know being a busybody, and like I think she's got this whole like fight with her boss about like he's convinced that he is an Englishman, is from Penzance, and like she's like, no, it's from Pinafore, and the joke is they keep saying it's like, and he's like, no, it's from the one about duty, and they're all about duty. And like three different people say that at different times, and it's like because every single Harvard writer, I think, is a Gilbert and Sullivan fan because it's the one type of operatic-ish music you can do as an amateur. But like and all these people inevitably became television writers, which is why I think it permeated down. But like I just think that it's that in there as well, these Amdram compatible operattas that are all about like English virtues
Mhm.
as being the musical choice as the backdrop for this just reinforces that really well without really like like it wasn't as they could have been less subtle and like played like well they actually know that they play God Save the King in Canada, but like something like almost there, something like Jerusalem or something, which is more played in England than it is because
Or
it's
like
all
Rule
about,
Britannia or something like that.
yeah, something like that, which is way more like Englishy, like which would be a more clear, maybe more obvious, and not as amusing like choice.
Mhm. But yeah, God, I just love Tilby and Forbes. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. Have you seen any of the other films, by the way?
No,
Have
I've
you
not, but I want to watch every single
you
one of them now.
you need to watch When the Day Breaks. It also got an Oscar nomination. I think from our discussion today,
Mhm.
it is intensely up your alley. I think you'll really
Wonderful.
enjoy it.
It's like people like this is exactly what I want this category to be. Like when I said before about like when the Hupleys were being nominated a lot, like in the 60s and 70s. Like it's like it's this kind of like I want interesting. I'm not that interested in people who are using short animations as part of the conveyor belt to eventually doing features, which I know it's totally fine if you want to do that. That's fine. But I am really interested like in people that like actually have something to say within this format, like it's not
Yeah.
just this is for the portfolio. It's like because I think that this exact thing, like everything you said about the remittance bed, this is really interesting. It's actually not that much there. It's not enough to go past a short film. Like you don't want to watch a feature film about like a guy going off and you know what I mean, like it's miserable
Mhm.
and boring. This is just long enough that going, oh, that's interesting, and you get the insight you need. And if you want to read up on them, that's totally fine, but it's not more than it needs to be, and it suits this medium really well.
D- I I feel like there probably is a movie out there where
Oh,
it
there
is just
must
like
be.
the slow, painful death of a remittance man.
Oh, there must be, but like unless it has someone like Christopher Plummer in it, who I think could make it work, I
Mhm.
don't know if I'd want to watch it. You know what I mean?
It feels like an 80s Jeremy Iron movies or something like
Yeah.
that.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. Um, my partner and I were obsessed with I showed him Reversal of Fortune and I'd seen it. He hadn't. So he was not prepared for everything in it. He's like, who's this Sunny Von Beulah woman? I love her and want to be her. Like she's in a coma? Yes. And also like just Jeremy being both the most charming man you've ever seen, but also a vampire who's never met another human being.
Yes. God,
And
his Oscar win was so deserved. I really liked that
it's
win.
it's so good because like again because the thing he's such a freaking weirdo in it, but it's like I can't stop watching him.
Hmm.
And like his I love a lot. Like it's that thing where you're like, oh cool, men can act and they can do a lot and it can be good, you know? Like because it's doing a
Where's the
lot
TikTok clips of this?
basically, right? Because you're like, because there's a lots where you should be like, oh, I don't know. There's a lot of warning signs here. There's a ball cap, and he's playing a guy that probably murdered his wife or tried to murder his wife, and we're supposed to like this guy. Okay, and Dershowitz is his lawyer. It's like, okay.
It's so funny, like
It's
realizing that the lawyer is Alan fucking
I
Dershowitz.
know, right? Like it's what makes it even more bananas today. But like I'm also we're also my partner and I have this thing where I like to give him like commemorative plates for our anniversary of like
Oh,
actresses who he has
oh,
become fixated on. I designed them for him.
oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, so I'll send photos. We have one of Cherry Jones, one of Holland Taylor, one of Una O'Connor, and one of Geraldine Chaplin. And he, when we were watching Reverse of Fortune, I was like, okay, so this woman's in it, right? She is a Broadway legend. She only made like 4 movies, but you're gonna love her because like she won like 7 Tonys and she's a great acting teacher. And he also knows who Uta Hagen is because of Trixie Mattel referencing her a lot.
Hmm.
So like when he watches it, he's like, I love this woman. Like, my lady is not diabetic. And then we watched The Boys from Brazil, where she plays like the sort of the Hannibal Lecter social worker. You know, the one that's like, no, I do not know about these Nazis. I just gave the babies to the American couples. And then like when she starts getting annoyed, she gets more and more anti-Semitic towards Laurence Olivier. And you're just like, this is it's very like actory in like a really fun way.
Hmm.
Yeah, sorry. That was a
No,
that was a
you're fine.
tangent.
It's a good tangent.
Yeah, there's a lot. But yeah, you're right. Like Jeremy Irons, remittance man thing would be really good.
Hmm.
An 80s Jeremy Irons one when he's fresh off his 2 Tonys, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like right before Brideshead Revisited.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like in his French Lieutenants era.
Yes, yeah. When he's got that sort of young and hot thing, rather than when he's like a mature man. Yeah, that's very
Exactly.
true.
Definitely.
Yeah, Brideshead era is perfectly correct.
But uh unfortunately it can't happen. Unless it did. I don't know his filmography that well, but I don't think it did.
No, I find him fascinating because, he was a lead actor who won an Oscar and a Tony and an Emmy, which is to say he's very popular, but he never once ever made a conventional movie, I don't think. He
Yeah,
has like that he has like that James Mason quality of like the thinking woman's leading man, So it's like you're always a freak, and I like it like a lot. And obviously because he is like such an oddball in life,
yeah,
yeah,
he's got some weird opinions.
so like I don't know if you know this about him, but like he owns a castle in Ireland, and I think he believed for many years that he was of Irish descent. And that's like a thing. A lot of English people want to think that they're Irish because it kind of makes them feel a bit less like villains. And it kind of feels like they're part of like a more ancient culture or something. But he went on Who Do You Think You Are? And he learned that he wasn't Irish and was devastated and he was very sad.
Hmm. Oh, poor guy.
Poor Jeremy.
Poor Jeremy. You still got your castle though.
He still got his castle like next to Tori Amos. They live in the same area.
Hmm.
Anyway.
But yeah, do you have anything else you'd like to say about wildlife?
No, like other than like I just think that everything you said about the resistance that the filmmakers had towards digital filmmaking is really good because yeah, this is a it's painted on glass, is it? Or is it just
No,
paint?
I actually don't know for certain, but I know it was made with like actual paints. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I I, I had the type of paint used written down somewhere, but I don't have it anymore. But I don't think it's
It's
paint on glass.
no, it probably isn't because that's more whenever they nudge it around, right? It was definitely
Yeah,
every
like
frame
this
was a new
is.
frame.
I think they just did like normal paintings and then
Yeah,
scanned them and maybe use some digital animation to help animate them. But
I think they comped it digitally definitely. I think they did like the characters and then they did the backgrounds. They didn't do it as a single painting, I don't think.
okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, like it, and that's one of those moments where it's like, I definitely see how you thought this would save time, but it ended up being just as much time as.
Exactly.
But
It,
anyway, yeah, but like I think that it's a technique that isn't very often used because it's labor intensive. But I think that it's cool. It's cool when people find reasons to use techniques which aren't as fashionable or
mhm.
even as practical.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's their bread and butter. It's like so. I think it was Wendy Tilby who actually did do a paint on glass film called Strings. That took
mm,
forever. And then
mm,
their first collaboration together, I think, was When the Day Breaks, which it involves they they did the animation, then ran it through photocopies a few times. And like some of the scenes are like rotoscope, but then they draw like animal heads on the people. Oh,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's a very, very interesting film to look at, but it's
And
fantastic.
and
And
that's what I
then
love. Like, I love whenever people find ways to because it's like you're drawing every frame. Like, let's just find a way to really push it, not just try to ape reality. Let's just like make this monstrous in its technique, you know?
yeah. And then the Flying Sailor is just a complete mash together of all these different styles. And it's beautiful, but it's also like people didn't like it when we were watching it for like the Oscar nominations last year because it's just like the guy gets blown up and then it's just this imaginary the dream sequence kind of. It's just like
Mhm,
it's crazy and insane. I loved it, but a lot of people didn't. But it's just like
mhm.
they're people when Tilby and Forbes, they just like to just do something different, and that's always so admirable.
This is the great strength of the Canadian Film Board as a body,
Exactly.
right? Where it's that like, look, the stakes are low when it comes to animated shorts. I don't know why I don't know why anyone should have to feel to be like make a people pleasing production, right?
Hmm.
It's like some are instead they work on the paradigm of when they're good, they're good. When they are bad, they are absolutely horrific. But
Yes.
I'm okay with that because the stakes are low here. There's no responsibility. It's not huge sums of money. If $100 million movie is bad, then that's a scandal. Like if it's incoherent, it's like, how is this the case?
Hmm.
But if it's like a short movie like this, I'm like, I don't care. It looked nice. I took something or maybe nothing from it, but yeah, that's what's just so good about it because it's no surprise that I think the Canadian Film Board films in this lineup are the stronger ones
Hmm.
and more interesting.
Yeah, it's like whenever they get nominated, it's always a joy to see them. Like even when they aren't like my favorite stuff, like I'm not a fan of Richard Conde usually, but at
Mhm.
the same time, I do appreciate like the stuff he does. It's like
Yeah,
I used to despise the Big Snip, but I've come around on it.
it's
It
yeah, like it's I think it's one of these things like when in doubt, but yeah, for stuff where I don't like, I'm like, look, I think the landscape will be poor without it, even if I don't like it, if I think if its legacy may not be great. Sometimes I'm like, it's
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you were saying, it's like when they're good, they're good. When they're bad, they're terrible. It's just like
Yeah,
that. That's definitely the case when I'm watching through like the Oscar nominees, like the shortlisted films this year. It's not a great lineup. Like there's a few good things, but there's a lot of really mediocre to terrible stuff in there.
mhm, mhm.
And it's
Which is like, yeah, that's the risk we take, right?
exactly.
Like that you made that point about the streamers dominating the live action shorts because I feel the live action shorts are in a pretty bad state.
Yeah,
Um,
they have been for a while.
yeah.
It's a category like so I've watched all the winners in every nearly every category. There's like 16 that I just can't watch because they're in
Mhm.
archives or whatever. But of the all categories, live action short is easily the worst one because
Yeah.
it's such a hodgepodge, but it's usually just generic and mediocre. Or
Mhm.
it's just like sometimes
It's
it can be really good, sometimes it can be really terrible, especially
I
recently.
yeah, I feel like the worst, what's that movie? Is it Skin or something? But
Yes.
these ones where it's like, we're not so different, you and I. Like, oh, let's like have a dialogue between two diametrically and just like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And not like in it, like not that you could get anything from that specific conversation, but like, it's like it's always like at a very shallow level. And it's just
Exactly.
like, why is it like I would much rather just give me something give me a fantasy thing, give me like a radical feminist view of something, give me like as in like I'd rather just something a bit more wacky and weirder rather than like this posturing of like some sort of dialogue between whatever because it's always the worst fate type thing anyway, but you're just like this is boring. It's
Hmm.
boring.
Yeah, like there's so many of them, especially in the past decade. It's just
Yeah,
like in my ranking of all the different all the winners of live action short, it's like five in the five or of the top of the bottom 10 were in the last 10 years. It's
yeah.
just like I don't understand why things just got so bad so quickly, but
I
I don't know.
I was talking about this earlier today with my partner. I think that because I said it just a few minutes ago, but I think because the barriers to making a short like this, the impediments are lower, right?
Hmm.
That's a wonderful thing. Gives lots of opportunities to people that don't have opportunities to do features and stuff. Now the thing is, not everyone is a good filmmaker. So
Hmm.
and it's
And
like
it's like and the Academy is just a lot about just like the superficial story and just like
yeah,
does this feel important?
yeah. And I think sometimes it can be easy to when people become famous for like features, and when they get to that stage in their career, you only see the features. And sometimes when you look back at shorts they may have done early in their career, like oh, I see, like the talent, the viewpoint, it's there. Like it's
Hmm.
and it can be just an average short of theirs, but going, I see how this person became the person that made whatever, right?
Hmm.
There's I have a really good collection of short films. I think it's the Cinema 16 ones from like God 15 years ago. And like they have like they do like 16 short films, and it's always like there's four, I think it's four DVDs in the collection. And it's always like 16 European films, 16 American films, 16 world films, something like that. And it's like there'll be a nice mix of like films you've never heard of, maybe a film that is famous but the filmmaker isn't famous, and then they'll have something by like here's an early film by Gus Van Sant, and it's like some of the films are really good. Sometimes the films that have like a bit of pedigree in that they're relying on you knowing the director's name and to be an in. And it's like, oh, Gus Van Sant doing an adaptation of like a William S. Burroughs story. Okay, and you're going, it's pretty good. It's a nice sense of style, interesting. And like, again, you can see that. Oh, of course, this person went on to do some interesting work,
Hmm.
um, which is I think why you don't see a lot of the short films, because I guess also, I feel that the short film category has never really been to showcase even notable filmmakers early in their career.
But yeah, it's just like you do occasionally accidentally get a couple people like Andrea
Yeah,
Arnold and Martin McDonagh have won Best Live Action
yeah, yeah,
Short, or but it's also first of all, it's just hard to really get them like to just see like who's going to be a future filmmaker, but
yeah,
at the same time, it's just a weird category, and it's like it
yeah.
can be fun weird sometimes, especially the early years, like when the category meant nothing, and it's just
Oh
like
God, yeah.
documentaries were in live action were in documentaries. It's just like things were a mess, but
I
it's
mean,
just
Benji is just infamous, right?
yeah, Benji winning best documentary, and also it was
Neighbors,
Neighbors.
yeah.
Neighbors was nominated or I think it was just nominated for documentary, but then won live action short. Or but it's just like why
Yes,
was it in documentary?
it's we had to study that a lot. That one we watched that one a lot in college, because it's pretty famous. Everyone loves Norman McLaren, and because it got an Oscar, it's usually an in, right? But yeah, that's just one where
No, it
it's
was the
like,
reversed. It won documentary, but was nominated for live action.
yes, and it's like, well, it's technically neither of those, but okay,
Yeah, it's just like it's real. It's an animated film, but it's like it's before they really understood what like pixelation was.
yeah,
Like
it's like I'll give them a little bit of leeway on that, but it's like, it's neither of these really.
yeah. Like we do later get like pixelation films in the animated short category. Like there's a
Mhm.
couple in the 70s, I think.
Yeah, I
But
feel
yeah.
like it very much has its moment in the 70s.
Yeah, and I think they were both from the NFB as well. It's just like
Mhm.
they had fun with it.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
because Norman McLaren was like the big guy
yeah,
back then. It's just like
yeah, yeah,
they all were in his footsteps.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
uh, but yeah, we I think that's a good ending point for our
Yeah, that's good.
discussion of wildlife.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now that we've gone through and talked about the five nominees, we will rank them all. And Dash, you'll start us off with your number five.
My number five is probably the Fantastic Flying Books of
Mr.
Mr.
Morris
Morris Lessmore.
Lessmore.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Morris Lessmore.
Yeah.
Um,
If you wanted to say a little bit, you can.
yeah, it's like well intentioned, but I think a bit vague. The fact the children's storybook or children's book origins of the the writer's background is apparent. And I think it's fine for that medium, but for a film, I think this needs a tighter point of view, I think, in places.
Mhm.
Well, the vibes weren't enough for me.
And my number five is A Morning Stroll, which is, perfectly fine, perfectly fun
Mhm.
little short film. And it's like, I like all of these films, so I just have to put something at number five. And
Yeah,
that's the one that I like the least.
yeah.
Number
I
four.
think my number four is A Morning Stroll, I think, and it's only because the other three I like more. I think that, and Fantastic Flying Books I like less. I think that, yeah, much like what you said, it's totally fine. I think that, like I said before, it probably shouldn't be in this lineup if I'm being quite frank. Like I mentioned Jojo and the Stars, that other movie that Sugoff won a BAFTA for. Like that's a lot more stylistically interesting visually. There's a story in it, like a coherent enough story, and it feels a lot more like a kind of thing that like could be nominated for an Oscar. This one just feels a bit more like a. It's not tech demo-y, but it just doesn't quite feel like someone's sat down with a point of view about a topic.
Hmm. My number four is La Luna,
Ah.
which was my number three until I moved up Sunday. But La Luna, I do really enjoy it. I think it's visually interesting. It's a very iconic short for a reason. But at the same time, it's just like it's a bit light, and I didn't find
Yeah,
myself like fully engrossed in it enough to really compensate for that. Whereas for like other Pixar shorts or other films in this lineup, perhaps, they I was more charmed by them in order to compensate for what I
yeah.
found a little lacking.
Yeah, and I think that as much as I praised it having like a triad in those characters, like realistically the kid's the only one that's like actually characterized. The dad and the
Yeah,
grandpa, as much as they are slightly distinguished, they're basically the same. So I think that
yeah.
more work needed to go into like making those distinctions better.
Hmm.
And I think then maybe it would have been a bit stronger, maybe.
Was Luna your number three?
It was my number three, yeah.
Okay,
Um
so easy.
yeah, yeah.
And then my number three is Sunday, which
Okay.
I did really, which our discussion of it, like I said, it helped me really appreciate it a bit more. Like I do really love the world that we're in, but it's just it in its depiction of a child being bored. I found myself a little bored by it, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it there is just a lot of distinctive imagery in there. There's a lot to really like. There's a lot to that it really it does more than it looks like it's doing, and it's
Mhm.
like it and like I started off my discussion of it, it's like there you can feel a broader world beyond what the short is specifically saying is showing you, and like is that is a really great detail of a short film if it
Yeah.
can show you more beyond what its capabilities, and that's good job.
I just realized now, it reminds me a lot of do you know a movie called The Hill Farm?
Yes. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that's
think
the Mark Baker one.
yes. And it's a very similar kind of movie, and it's a very similar kind of this kind of animated short, which is some of these movies, like Luna, for example, like I can see the filmmaking, right? It's like here's the camera moves, and even with the Morning Stroll, like the middle section, it's like I feel the filmmaking, the storyboarding. I see how it all. This is a sequence, right?
Mhm.
With the Morning Stroll, no, not Morning Stroll, with Sunday, it has a feeling that the Hill Farm does, where it's like I can see the line tests, like I can see how you did a shot, and it's like and you're really piecing this together in a good way, like it's all considered, but it isn't as it feels more like an assembled montage rather than like a contrived scene. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, and I like that about it. I think it gives it a kind of rawness as well.
Mhm.
Like nothing is too over animated. Like the bit where the mug falls off the counter, beautiful. You know.
Yeah, The Hill Farm was actually nominated in this category, and I don't
Ah.
recommend you listen to it because we were very mean to it. But
Look, I get it.
I do like The Village a lot more, though. I think
Yeah.
that's a lot more interesting. Like it has a very similar vibe, but it's like I enjoy the
But
darker story there.
yeah, but you see what I mean? Then that thing where it's like it's a little disjointed in
Yeah.
that these are people drawing pictures and they're trying to make whatever scenes they can. Like it isn't like we have a shot list and resources and
Mhm.
a structure, and like it just, if you feel the person over the animation desk a lot
Eh,
more in that one, in a
yeah,
way that it makes it really enhances it, I think.
yeah. It's like Mark Baker made that film while at university, so it's like
Yeah,
that's the reason why, right? It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah. And I think that also then, like, I think you can, for me anyway, I can forgive some of its like faults because I'm like, I watched it when I was literally in college too, so I'm like, this
mhm.
could be me, this should be me.
Why am I
Not
not
but
making this?
but yeah, not like a, it's like I would have killed for that part. No, it's like, as in, this is this is the caliber of work and ambition I should be having, right?
It's just like you're at college, you're making a movie called The Hill Farm, and then you watch this movie, it's like, God damn it, he stole my idea 30 years
Baker.
ago.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'll make a TV show about a pig. It's like it'll be fine.
Yeah. No one's done that.
Okay. What's your number two?
My number two is oh, I think wildlife. Yeah, wildlife. Like it's almost neck and neck, but I think that yeah, like it's only because Sunday I responded to more on a personal level, but wildlife, I thought, like, this is just a beautiful piece of work. Like
Mhm.
I like this story. I feel like I've learned something. I feel like I've gained a perspective on a thing I didn't know a lot about, which is what I love when I watch a film from a culture that I'm not a part of.
Mhm.
Even if it, even though if it's still being Canadian, it's like, look, I'm not a million miles away from this culture, but don't
I
know a
mean, like
lot.
physically, you're a good distance away, but
Yeah,
like,
but also, it's like English speaking, former British colony, literally live in Britain. It's like
yeah,
it's not, and like I grow up watching American television. I know obviously America is in Canada, but like there's a lot,
yeah.
like this isn't. I'm not watching like something from like Vietnam or something where it's like I have no context for anything happening here.
Mhm.
But like I thought that it was just really well, really deftly done by the two directors, just beautifully put together and just nicely stylized in places and just visually interesting to look at and say something meaningful and interesting.
Yeah. My number two is the Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lessmore,
Okay.
where it's like I agree. We agree on a lot of things about this movie. The only thing where we disagree is that I was charmed by it. I enjoyed the story it was telling, despite all its faults and everything. And it's like that charm just took me all the way to number two. It's just but
Oh no, I respect it. Like it's one of these things, like, there's things people like a lot. I do not like. I am not a Taylor Swift fan. I see the way people are fans about her. It's like I want to understand this because I am not seeing this fervor in what I am seeing. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like I want to understand. It's but yeah, I'm not there, I don't think. But like I think that it had a lot of it had a lot of like visuals.
Mhm,
Lots of, like, it wasn't thin on that. I think that it needed just a tighter script, I think.
mhm. But tell us about your number one.
Sunday I felt seen. No, I do mean it when I said that, like, I found I don't know why, just like on a very like intuitive level, like I just this felt very uh relatable to me, even though, like, it's not that it's especially specific to my experience, but it's just like little things like my favorite movie as a teen was Ghost World. There's the motif in that about that bus that she gets at the end, but the that takes her away. Like, that felt something I was looking forward to when I was going to turn 18. And there's just the thing I say about the railroad connecting the kid, to like a larger world. There's just something about that I find incredibly it gets me.
Mhm,
Um and like, so this is one of those movies where definitely I think you can get out of it what you put into it or bring to it, right? And I think that a lot of the stuff, yeah, I brought to it really just uh made me reflect on a period that I don't necessarily like think look nostalgic look back at with nostalgia, but like it felt real to me.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I'm glad that this podcast could introduce you to the film then.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. Well, because like I'm shocked because I didn't realize that I followed him as well on Twitter, and like
Yeah,
he told me that.
that was a funny realization. It's like for those listening, it's like as I was researching, it's just like I realized that uh Dashiell was following Patrick Doyon on Twitter, or I was just like I and I told him is just like I really like that it's like as I'm researching I find out that you're already following like one of these filmmakers on Twitter, and he's like Enrico Casarosa. It's
Yeah,
just and turned out he was also following him too. But it's
I mean
just like
this is what illustration animation Twitter is like. Everyone follows everyone, you know. So it's like no one's a surprise.
mhm.
Sometimes it's just like a huh. Didn't realize it was like that close. Or sometimes it's like I literally went to college with this person. Like I went to college with a nominee from a few years ago. Like it
like
happens.
part of me was hoping that it's like you would actually like end up knowing like being like an illustrator, it's an animator yourself, it's like you'd have like a funny story about like one of these people, but
Yeah.
didn't happen this time, but maybe another time.
Yeah, it's like this reminds me of that time at Cannes. Yeah. I
Like
recall this.
I stormed the Pixar offices one day and saw this happen.
And there was Pete Docter. Yeah.
It was right after they murdered John Lasseter.
They had skinned him alive and were having one of his Hawaiian shirts on display. Yeah. I
Like
once
those
called him
weren't
the
shirts, they were just his skin.
yeah. What if it was just like that? I once called him the Imelda Marcos of animation because of his Hawaiian shirts.
Oh my God. That's terrible. Oh my God.
Yeah. Look, a
But
lot of animation has a lot of like cultism to it, and like I'm not really like a culty person, so I'm like Disney, who cares? Dead old man.
fuck him.
I mean, okay, sorry. If I can have yet another diverse, I do want to make actually a very good point about this, if that makes sense. If
Go
that's
ahead.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, one thing I found really daunting when I was in college was the shadow that Disney casts to this day is multifaceted, conflicted. I found it daunting as a young animator and filmmaker. And what I found irksome was, and this is the thing I maybe want to like instill in people, was that what I found daunting when I was in college was we would be told to look at Disney films like from the 1940s as if they were still relevant to us in the 2000s in the same way that they were relevant in 1940 something. And I'm like a white English speaking guy. Like I'm not that different from the guys that make them. God forbid I was one of the women in my class that um and it's that like at this time I was learning a lot about classic Hollywood, which is to this day like one of my favorite periods of film history. And it's like so like I'm going like, ooh, I'm gonna watch Rebecca tonight for the first time. I've always wanted to see it, and like that changed my life. And like I'm seeing all these stuff and like the evolving relationship that criticism can have with movies like Rebecca or something like a movie like Breakfast at Tiffany's, which you know is like remembered fondly in the popular imagination. When you look at it, not only is it not a very good movie, you get to the Mr. Yunioshi bit where you're like, this is indefensible. But we can still have these conversations about how it's still relevant or not relevant today. And I guess I just wanted to say that, like, yeah, like learning to not worship these figures too intensely, because I feel that in animation, the way it's taught, sometimes it's a bit too codified.
Hmm.
And it's like it needs to be a little more flexible.
Yeah, it's like one of the things that's like really indicative of that to me. It's like how often people claim that like Snow White was the first animated movie or
Yeah,
like the first animated feature. And it's just like there is a whole history of animation before that moment. And it's just like it's something that gets so often just overlooked because it's like who care? Like people are just so dismissive. Like who cares about anything before Disney? Like they're the ones who
yeah,
made animation art or whatever. But it's like
yeah.
that's just not true.
Yeah, it's like no, he did a lot to homogenize it. That's why every single goddamn like labor thing in the 20th century is always like, and then we had a fight with the Disney studio. Like
Yes.
there's, and everyone, it's like these the legacy is mixed. That's fine. You can appreciate the work. That's fine. But like it's like you do have a responsibility to like at least be critical of it in some capacity. Because as much as we love these classic movies like Snow White, like Pinocchio, and all that, it's like and they have a lot of charm, they have a lot of technical merit. They're often not very good films. The editing is not great, the characterization is not great, the dialogue is often not great. That's fine because we're not making animated movies in 1940 something anymore.
Mhm.
But we can't just take them at like literally the same value that they are then without any criticism.
And it was funny when I was making this podcast, since like as I got into the 70s, 60s and 70s, when we see more independent and foreign filmmakers, and like
Yeah,
how often the stories behind them are, we saw Disney movies and wanted to make something else.
yeah, yeah,
It's just such a just a nice through line through a lot of those filmmakers, and it's
yeah.
fun to watch.
And I think that too often people interpret it like as being acrimonious, and like it's not. It's just that this is like when something is so prescribed, it's like I just want to do one thing differently,
Hmm.
and that's totally fine. And it's like we do have a responsibility to like keep that in mind, I
Exactly.
think. Okay. Sorry,
Anyway,
Nico, that was my insight. I just wanted to make that.
my
It's
number one
it's
was
the thing that matters
wildlife.
most. Oh, I'm shocked.
But I actually am shocked because like I had it at 2 stars going into
I
this,
know
and it went up to 4.
what a comeback.
Underdog story of the fucking century. But yeah, just God, I was just floored by this on this watch. It was just combination of just like the style of it, just like
Mhm,
Tilby and Forbes just being great at just like doing these different looking films, and just like
mhm,
combined with this new story to me about these remittance men, and then just the way the story goes, the way it's told, it
mhm,
all just comes together to this one perfect little package that's
mhm.
just so fucking good.
Yeah. You said before, it's like, because the comic motif is just so beautifully, subtly done. Like the thing I said about people in these situations of people because they flopped out of England, it's like, because that's what it is.
Yes.
But they're not hammering it home, and you're like, oh, yes, that's what this is. It's just so beautifully done. And like as when I mentioned before with like the Hill Farm and with Sunday, you can feel like here's a line test. Like the scenes are very much like in themselves almost short films. Like it's just whatever
Mhm.
bit. That was another film that feels very assembled, but it's just it's like you can see the individual like distinct sequence or shots, and it's like this is really nice. It's so beautifully built.
It's really great. I'm very mad at myself for not liking it for so long.
I mean, how long has it been since you gave it that rating?
Let me quickly just look, because I think I have my diary pulled up in one of my tabs here. Wildlife reviews. Um, oh, it was 4 years ago, almost to the day. It was January 28th,
Oh.
2020, and then I today is the 22nd as we're recording.
Okay, I think that is tough to justify then because if it was like 10 years, you could be like, ah, the impetuousness of youth. I'm not the same person I was then. Like,
Like I said, it was more just the way I was watching
yeah,
it. It's just
yeah.
like doing those long marathons. It's like, yes, it got me through the category really easily, but it also led to me like overlooking a lot of things
No, no,
that just
I fully understand that. Like, I have been reading a lot of X-Men comics over the last few months, and like sometimes I'll be through a bit where I'll just like blast through some of it, and I'm like, wait, she's dead? Like, as in, like, when did that happen? It's like I literally read that last issue, and like they're telling me this stuff has happened. Like, I none of that went, and like sometimes it's like, was the story just incomprehensible, or am I just an idiot? Like, it's just yeah, trying to worry what is it me or is it the film?
yeah.
And sometimes the problem is you.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And it's like and so like and just watching these, it's like a lot of films that like uh my ranking is shifting like quite a lot. Like I uh, for like a lot of these years, and it's just like films that I had completely forgotten suddenly become like one of my favorites, and like
Yeah.
films that I thought were like some of the best of the category drop down quite a bit because it's just like there isn't as much to them as I may have originally saw. And also
Yeah.
4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
My taste
Yeah,
can
yeah,
change
sorry.
over a long period.
Yeah, I didn't want to poo-poo that either. I was I was just joking. Like 4 years is a total like
I know
reasonable
you were
amount of
joking. It
time.
wasn't a response to you. I'm just saying it's like there's a lot of things that can like change over time. It's just
Yeah, yeah. I think like I because it's like it's um sorry, I had a point I was gonna make, but it was never mind. Sorry, move on. I forgot.
it's okay. Uh, but before we end our show, are there any
Mhm.
final thoughts you'd like to share, Dashiell, or anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on because like this was really, really nice. It's just a really like wonderful set of things to do. I love, I love talking about films.
Mhm.
But like,
I'm gonna make sure to invite you again because you're a great guest. Like when
oh,
we get past the
thank you.
animated short era or like the Oscar era, it's like I'm we're gonna talk later about like what you would want to do for your next
Awesome.
episode.
Awesome, awesome. No, but like, no, this was a beautiful set of films. Like, I do like how, like, as much as there are some that frustrated me, I think that on the whole, it's like this is an interesting set of stuff that I've enjoyed considering in comparison to each other and on their whole. And I think that I also managed to touch on lots of things about this medium and this landscape of this medium that like I have feelings about. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to do that because that was really wonderful. But yeah, and I guess the main thing I want to promote is that like yeah, my partner and I sell Oscar-based patches, like mission patches called under our brand Jungle Red. So if anyone wants those, you should get them. You can find them at junglereddesigns.com. Um, and my Twitter account, X account, whatever we're supposed to call it now.
I just still
Um,
say Twitter. It's just like nothing's gonna make me change that.
I have found myself starting to say X, and I'm like, no, we are not doing this. We are not letting this happen. But it's it's like death by a thousand cuts. It's happening, and I don't like it. But yeah, you can find me there at Dashiell Silva. That's like my primary thing. I tweet a lot about silly things. I try to be positive and nice and silly, maybe a little biting at times, but I try not to be mean.
You're very sweet.
Okay, I'm glad. But yeah, yeah, like and I love talking to people and stuff. But yeah, the main thing is like if you ever want to like support what we do, Jungle Red is the thing. We're very proud of our Oscar patches. We have patches for every single best actress, best actor, best supporting actress, best supporting actor, best director, and some notable honorary award winners. So if you're ever desperate for an Alice Brady in Old Chicago 1937 patch, we have it.
I'll make sure to get my Van Heflin patch soon.
Oh my God, Van Evelyn.
He's so
Yes.
good. He was so great in that.
Yeah, no, it's I joke about this a lot, but sometimes I wonder if men can act. And sometimes you can see like when a man can act and you're like, oh yeah, actually can. It's like you like watching you on screen.
Yeah, Van Heflin, Jeremy Irons, men who can act.
Oh, literally, like it's a short list. And I think it more or less died out after the mid 20th century, like British and Irish Hellraisers. Like you get this like last gasp of like Peter O'Toole, Alan Bates, Oliver Reed, Richard Burton, just
Mhm.
fabulous. And then that's it, seemingly, except yeah, last gasp in like Jeremy Irons and Ray Fiennes, and that's it.
But yeah,
Anyway, yeah,
thank you, Dashiell, for coming on the show,
thank you
and
so much.
thank you, listener, for tuning in. This has been the short podcast about short films. Until next time, goodbye.